Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to open this meeting of the September 8th, 2020 City Council meeting this evening. Thank you all for coming. And with that, I would like to call on my friend and neighbor, Maureen Cardoza, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Maureen.
You bet, Frank.
Next on our agenda this evening is communications from the public on matters that are not part of our public hearings.
Can you speak up?
Oh, sure.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to do that. This is the time we take public comment for all matters that are from the public that are not involving any of our public hearings this evening. So if you're here to comment on one of our public hearing matters, please wait till that time. But if you have anything else you'd like to bring to our attention, or there's anybody that wants to provide public comment, please do so now.
Hello, my name is Simon McCullough. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, and we need your address.
You can't hear me? You can't understand me? Are you sure?
Whatever you're comfortable with, son.
Okay, I'm more comfortable speaking with it on. Thank you. I will try to enunciate well. I am Simon McCullough, and I'm a resident at 616 Wisconsin Avenue. I'm here to talk about pedestrian safety on Wisconsin Avenue, which I'm sure you all know is not a very pedestrian-friendly road. I walk on the street every day, and I rarely feel safe, and I never think of it as a nice street to walk on. I've read through the Wisconsin Avenue Master Plan, and I really like the long-term ideas in there, but I think that there are some simple things that we can do in the short term to make it a safer and more convenient street to walk on. I have 4 points to make that use existing infrastructure and a couple of ideas that I think would require minimal investment, but would provide a significant, not used to public speaking, provide significant increase to pedestrian safety. My first thought is to repaint current crosswalks. Every single one is completely worn away. I know that there is a repainting schedule for all street markings in the city, but this really needs attention. Perhaps using a different line pattern to slow the wear of the crosswalk would be a more sustainable option. Second, I think there should be a pedestrian crossing sign facing southbound traffic at the crosswalk at Marina Crest. With all the paint worn off in the crosswalk, and without a sign, it is impossible to know that a crosswalk exists from the driver's perspective, and extremely difficult to cross for the pedestrian. Third, since the speed of cars on Wisconsin Avenue is unchecked after the Edgewood, Wisconsin light, and seeing the crosswalks is extremely difficult from inside cars, I think that an in-street pedestrian paddles notifying drivers to stop or yield for pedestrians would allow for safer crossings. Pedestrian paddles would be located in the middle of the crosswalks and would not inhibit the car lanes, but they would create a better visual of where the crosswalks are and emphasize the need for drivers to slow down. To allow for snow removal, the pedestrian paddles would have rubber-weighted bases that would make them easily removable when necessary. My fourth proposal is to improve the care of the street. I saw a street sweeper for the first time this morning on the drive to work in preparation for the new underpass project, which is great. I think it is just a simple request for the entire sidewalk and shoulder for all of Wisconsin to be free of trash and sand from the winter. It's really hard to walk and really hard to bike. My other ideas include more investment, but they are still necessary for a safe pedestrian experience on a short-term scale. They include installations of delineators at curb crossings, on the curb at crossings to provide a vertical element to the crosswalks, as well as RRFBs, or rectangular rapid flashing beacons at each crosswalk, like we have downtown at the lodge at Whitefish Lake. Apart from a complete overhaul of this corridor that is necessary, such as skinnier car lanes, protected bike lanes, and a sidewalk on both sides of the street, there are many smaller actions that can make this a more walkable and accessible road. We can start by maintaining what exists and make small investments towards a safer road for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
My name is Jenny. I live at 616 Wisconsin, and I actually want to talk about Wisconsin Avenue today. And before I do that, I just want to give you some of my background. So I've spent the past couple of years working in transportation planning. In particular, I've worked directly with city councils like yourself and community members like all of you here today across the world. So from Los Angeles to Paris, Bakersfield, Tulsa, Mexico City, in order to form a collaborative effort to make cities more friendly for bicyclists, pedestrians, and users of public transit. So with all of that behind me, I believe that the values that a city holds show themselves in who gets space to exist and who gets road allocation. So with this in mind, it's obvious that Whitefish, like many American cities, prioritizes drivers over pedestrians and cyclists. And today I'd like to focus on cyclists. When I say cyclists, I'm not just talking about our lycra-clad folks with expensive bikes, but rather folks who use biking and cycling as their primary form of transit. And so to put it bluntly, biking on Wisconsin is abysmal. A sidewalk is a place where pedestrians can and should have priority, but often in practice they do not. And it's not wide enough for cyclists and pedestrians to both feel safe. The shoulder of the road, which is often sandy at times and only a foot across, is insufficient. And similarly, I've read the master plan for Wisconsin, in addition to the bicycle and pedestrian master plan for Whitefish, and I am excited about both of these. But the need to reform our road is immediate and urgent. So while more street trees and a painted bike lane are on the horizon, they are not here yet. And I'm asking for minimal investment for cyclists on Wisconsin Avenue in particular. My requests include vertical signage indicating that cyclists have the right to use the full lane, and painted arrows to give road space to cyclists and to give cyclists peace of mind that they are welcomed, and further vertical elements in the road in order to reduce the speed of drivers. It seemed pretty easy to get some orange cones out for the roadwork today. I think it'd be a simple ask to do that for cyclists. Furthermore, in true Shoupian fashion, the amount of free parking available to cars and their drivers in downtown is offensive. I'm not against cars and I'm not against drivers, but I am against free storage of massive vehicles that are also inefficient, that are using space in the public right-of-way. So I encourage my city council to change this and to charge a modest fee for use of parking in downtown, and then utilize that money in order to fund both our snow bus and bicycle infrastructure. And I know many of you do value biking as a form of transit, and I'm looking forward to the road space that affirms that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment this evening? All right, with that, we'll close public, oh, excuse me, come on.
Good evening. My name is Kelby Strauss. Mr. Mayor, City Council members, I was going to say Honorable Mayor and distinguished City Council members, but there isn't anyone honorable or distinguished about any of you sitting before us tonight, and I'm not afraid to say it. You all hide behind your masks like cowards. This City Council belongs to the people of Whitefish. We sponsor your position, we pay your salary, we pay Montana taxes, we own businesses, and we support jobs in our community. It is because of us, the people, that any of you even have your position. Lest you forget, you work for us. And yet you think you have the right to dictate to the people regarding masks and now an emergency ordinance prohibiting gatherings and demonstrations.
Ma'am, I'm happy to take your comment. This relates to our public hearing on the ordinance. Could we take your comment at that time?
Sure, that's
That'd be
fine.
great. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'll just start over when you allow me.
Yeah, I will. Thank you. Any other public comment on items not on our public hearings this evening? Okay, seeing none, then we'll close that. And I will move on to any communications from any volunteer boards. Any volunteer board reports this evening? Council? Any volunteer board reports? Nope. All right. Next, we move on to our consent agenda. I'll need a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Motion is seconded. Any other comments?
Just that I think Ben did a great job on the financial report.
Great. Thank you so much. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously, Michelle. Now we're going to move on to our public hearings. Andy, would you like to make a motion to move?
Yeah, Mr. Deputy Mayor, typically this would go with a suspension of the rules, but I think we can get by with I would like to move that we reorder the public hearings and moving item G to the position of A and bumping everybody down one letter after that.
Can I have a second to that motion? Any other comment?
Sorry, Jake, I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Hennan. Any other comments? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay, and so our public hearings are now reordered. With that, I would like to open up the public hearing, or not a public hearing, but I'd like we take item G, the emergency ordinance prohibiting organized gatherings, demonstrations not subject to a special event permit.
Mr. Mayor,
staff.
could I make a comment quickly?
Sure.
Would you remind the public of our rules for civil dialogue, please, and
I
where
will.
they can find them?
Yep. As we get to the public hearing, I'll do it at that time, Steve. That's a great idea. Staff?
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and City Council members. I am going to give you an overview of the ordinance, and then because this was a police initiative ordinance, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Dial to follow up a little bit more on the need for this ordinance. As you're all aware, we've had numerous protests in the last 3 months. Most of those protests have been right outside on Baker and 2nd Street. Staff has received numerous letters, emails, and phone calls from people concerned about the protests, and those concerns include feeling intimidated to walk through the sidewalks, having to listen to bullhorns or megaphones, and concerns really regarding traffic. Some of the demonstrators have gotten very, very close to the right-of-way. We've heard it's hard to make right turns. We've also observed people actually walking not in the crosswalk in order to avoid having to go through the protests. We've also had a couple of altercations, one of which was physical. And just yesterday, the police cited an individual for grabbing somebody's flag and running off with it. We do have a special event ordinance which requires a permit if a demonstration is impeding the public's use of the sidewalk or the right-of-way, or for events over 75 people or more, but as of now, nobody has come forward with a special events permit for these demonstrations. The police department asked that we draft this ordinance, and its intent is not at all to prohibit demonstrations nor to infringe on anybody's rights. The intent really is just to constrain public demonstrations to the daylight hours, and again, I'll allow Chief Dial to talk a little bit more at length about the reasoning behind that. The city has always been committed to protecting people's First Amendment rights. And although we recognize First Amendment rights, those rights are not absolute. The United States Supreme Court and every other court has long held that cities may impose reasonable time, manner, and place restrictions on speech in order to accomplish governmental goals. Again, I'll turn it over to Chief Dial to explain a little bit more the reasoning behind it, but I really want to point out two things about the ordinance. The first is it's content neutral. It is not directed toward any group. It applies to every group. The second is that if a group feels as though they need to demonstrate past 7:00 p.m., they can apply for a special events permit and ask, that they be given more time. The city can, grant that, albeit according to certain conditions in the furtherance of public safety. So unless council has any questions for me, I will turn it over to Chief Dial.
Any questions for Angie? All right, that'd be great. Thanks, Angie. Chief Dial.
Good evening. I'm the villain, okay? None of these people up here get paid for what they're doing, okay? What this is all about is about public safety. It's not about taking away people's First Amendment rights. It's not about what party you're for or what platform you're on. It is about public safety. And when we have 110 to 120, sometimes 150 people out on the street, where do we get the resources to police those people? And part of the reason we brought this up is so the community would be informed about what is going on and what our concerns are. People don't, and I don't like this any more than most people do, but we look at best practices, we look at what you have to do to preserve law and order in this community, which people want us to do. I'll give you an example. A couple weeks ago, we had a disturbance between two individuals in front of the American Bank. At the same time, we had a three-car crash out on Highway 40 and 93. We had a domestic, and we had a theft. Now, when we have 150 people out here who at times act like children and can't control themselves, what do? We have to respond. We have a duty to people to respond. So therefore, we decided we have to do something to let the community know that if we don't get a handle on this, things could escalate. Now, for the most part, both sides have been very, very cooperative. We've met with people on both sides. Bridger meets with people. I've met with people. And we ask them and tell them what we expect. Majority of the people will at times, most of the time, will do as everybody hopes they do. And people, it's all about community policing. It's about you policing yourselves. That's what it's about. And if you don't agree with anybody, so what? That's what makes this a great country. I can disagree with somebody. I don't have to get violent. I don't have to yell. I don't have to scream. I can have a civil discussion with them and shake hands if not, and then we walk away and we still vote or have a theory about whatever we do. So I'm kind of on my soapbox, but I want you to understand why we brought this forward. There's a lot of violence going throughout the country. Do we want this in Whitefish? I don't think so. And if we can just have civil dialogue and people will respect each other's rights and people don't do things that are unsavory, vulgar. At times, and I've told the deputy mayor in this, I've told several council members and my boss, Dana Smith, it's like being a playground monitor. He spoke mean to me. He said a bad word. Grow up. And basically, that's what it's about. If we can all just respect each other's views. So, I've said it's about public safety. It's about people's rights. We in the police department are neutral. We want to protect everybody's rights. We want to make sure that when you are protesting, demonstrating, supporting, that you are doing the things that everybody would want to do. I had a social studies teacher many, many years ago, and he said, you can sit in a tree and throw apples out of the tree all day until it interferes with somebody else's rights. And what I see and what we get complaints about is the vulgarity on the signs. We've addressed that, and yes, thank you. Some people, and most of the people have changed that. Other things, we'll see people walking down the street because they want to go to a business on Central or down West 2nd Street, and they're intimidated because there's a whole bunch of people there, some people not masked. Whether you believe the COVID thing or not, I believe in it, and most people do believe that, there is a possibility of contracting it if you get too close. So it's a health issue. It's a safety issue, and a lot of people feel unsafe when they walk into a large crowd. We've had some productive meetings with a lot of people involved, and I think if we can all just come to an agreement that will respect each other's rights, that an ordinance such as this may not be required. But until that's demonstrated, I'm encouraging the city council to look at it, to examine it, and if we need more input, we can look into it. But currently, until people can police themselves, be community police, be our eyes, be our ears, be our conscience, and do the right thing, this is the only way that we can adequately apply our resources to everybody. How fair is it when we have to put 8 guys out here, or 8 police officers out here, and somebody who's having a theft or their home broken into has to wait or is delayed because people cannot control themselves about their emotions? And that's what this is all about. I'll get off my soapbox, and any questions from the council?
Any questions for Chief Dial at this time?
From the council?
Ma'am, this is the council. You'll have your opportunity for public comment. I don't see any, Chief Dial. Thank you so much.
Frank?
Oh, no.
What is, Chief, thank you for bringing this forward. It's an interesting ordinance. What role does the Sheriff's Department play in helping us police when you guys are overburdened, or if you're already responding to calls? How does the Sheriff's Department fit in?
We have an unwritten mutual aid agreement with the Sheriff's Department, with Kalispell and Columbia Falls. If they need help, we'll help them, and vice versa. If things were to really get bad, we could, and we are planning with other law enforcement partners, such as Highway Patrol and Border Patrol, but there is no real edict that the county sheriff's department has to help us. The county sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer in the county, but as far as anything that mandates them coming up to help us, it's a mutual aid thing, and we all help each other.
Have you required their help recently as these protests or demonstrations, whatever we're calling them, have gone on?
We haven't had to so far, but when we had the the neo-Nazis and all the blogging, and then we did ask them to help us at that time, and we during that time it was pretty nerve-wracking to think what might happen, and that's why we're looking at this. Is we want to make sure that we're prepared should things happen, and there's a lot of intel going throughout the country that as the election gets closer, that tensions are going to rise, people are going to do things, and that's why we want to be prepared, and we want to make sure we have some tools to help us if we need them. Hopefully we don't need them, and that's why we brought the ordinance forward.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Chief Dial?
Ben?
Chief Dow, could you let us know about how many police resources are you using out there on an average night?
On an average night?
Yeah. Or on the worst one?
I'm sorry, what was the last thing, Ben?
Or on the worst night? I mean, how many officers are actually out there?
If we can plan, and that's another reason for this ordinance, is if we have a special events permit, we know people are going to be coming out, it'll take half of our police force, and the issue is We've been accused of having too many, we've been accused of not having enough, and then we have farmers market, and we have, so I'm not going to whine, but, we have a lot of issues that drain our resources. So in the two larger rallies we've had between 8 and 9 police officers on. Keeping in mind, we have 2 or 3 police officers who worked the night before who have to go home and get sleep. They work 12-hour shifts. And so generally, I think Ben figured it out somewhere in the area of $1,400 in overtime has been expended so far. Not a lot, but it's when your overtime budget's $20,000, that's a pretty good hit on it.
Rebecca?
Dial, could you just talk a little bit about how COVID-19 has affected how you work and the extra precautions you have to take and in responding to emergencies in addition to your regular duties?
Yeah, COVID, it's been pretty much a living hell for everybody, I think, involved, especially the first responders. When we have to respond, we have to be very cognizant of our social distancing, making sure we're wearing an N95 mask in case someone does have it. We've had 2 officers who had to quarantine for 10 days because they were involved in a life-saving episode behind the VFW, and unfortunately the person died. But that makes a huge impact on our resources. So, and when everything was closed down, we've had to do a lot of extra patrols. We've had to make sure that the parks, businesses are being watched. So it's been a huge impact on the police department. One other thing too that I forgot to mention, as I said, it's kind of been a living hell. The thing with this ordinance that we're bringing forward is we're damned if we do and damned if we don't. And I hope people understand that. Because if something happens, if something escalates, they're going to say, why didn't you do something? So that's why we're bringing this up. Same thing with the COVID. That's why we've planned. When Councilor Quinnell asked me about the Sheriff's Department, we had a meeting before, when COVID started on mutual aid, combined command. We're having another meeting this week to talk about any potential civil unrest as that moves forward. So, like I said, we want to plan for the worst and hope for the best and hope people do what they're supposed to do, whether it's having a civil dialogue or wearing their mask or social distancing. So.
Any other questions from council? All right, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
At this point, ladies and gentlemen, a couple of things as we move forward with our public comment. I hope you'll all keep in mind, I know you're all cognizant of it, that we do have requirements for civil discourse in this city. You can find them on the back of our agenda. We hope you'll all follow those. The others, we have a number of people that would like to speak this evening. We hope you keep your comments direct and as brief as you can possibly make them. So we allow everybody time to get in and get out and make their comments known. And the third is that we'd like you to know one of the reasons that we have public hearings is because we really appreciate the input from the public on all matters that are before the council. And so with that said, I would open the public hearing at this time on the ordinance. Anybody want to take the first step? Madam?
Hi, I'm Jill. I live in Whitefish.
Jill, could we have your last name and address for the record, please?
I'm not giving you my address or my last name. My life was threatened 2 weeks ago down at your little rallies out front here, so I do not feel comfortable giving you that. This lace mask, by the way, is as effective as you guys taking your masks on and off. I just want to say that I work in emergency management. I'm also a first responder. I have no problem with the 7 p.m. cutoff time. most of our people. I was making them leave anyways at that time. We were there to wave American flags and congregate, and and that we have kids in our group. We need to be mindful of making sure that they get home on time. Megaphones and speakers, I also have no problem with that. On our side, we did have a woman that was that sang "America the Beautiful" on a megaphone. The other side has a speaker as well, and was playing music. You've invited this to our town with your words, your actions, the way you carry yourselves. There are individuals, when I've been down here, that are trying to instigate. They are taunting. They have personally taunted me. You're gonna shoot me? Why don't you just shoot me? That is unacceptable. Okay? Also, what I find unacceptable is shoving women over the age of 65, a few of whom were over 75. So there are people on the opposing side that have laid hands on women. I am one of them. I wanted to speak in person before I send my letter off to Chief Dial, and that is thanks to the instruction of my lawyer. You want to talk about health and masks and screens and whatever. We have masked individuals down there. I don't think it really matters whether someone's masked or not. We had the mayor walk through, not social distance, walk right past me, close enough for me to reach out and touch him and his whole family. Unmasked, not observing social distancing. We have people with filthy masks on, yelling in our faces. The cloth masks are not proper masks. They're not going to protect me, and I honestly, it's on the person who's wearing it whether or not it protects them. We have had people driving down the street flipping us off and insulting us with anti-Semitic slurs. I am messianic. I think it's disgusting. It's not coming from our side. I know that people like to claim that people on the right are bringing the neo-Nazis to town and the anti-Semitism, and I'm here to tell you, it's people that oppose us, the patriots, that are being offensive, okay? You address the signs out there. I do have a concern with there were girls that were, and I double-checked their ages. I had to make sure that they were up off the curb, they were standing in the street. So I'm out there feeling ethically bound to protect people that are not with me or with my group. Also, underage girls on the opposing side carrying foul-mouthed signs, F this, F that, unacceptable. And we want to talk about escalation. Once again, you invited this here. And I'm putting you on notice that because of the trash that you invited to town, if anything happens to me in the future, my lawyer is going to enjoy meeting you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
My name is Rafael Pease. I live here in Whitefish, and I'm going to take my mask off so the people who are anti-maskers here could hear me. I am a scientist, I'm an ecologist, and I have a lot of titles, but above all, I believe in evidence and facts. And, we've been protesting here for 15 weeks for things that are more noticeable in other parts of the country. Here, it's maybe some of you guys call it the paradise. but everything was pretty peaceful, and it continues to be peaceful between the Trumpers and everyone else who stands for knowledge and things are for basic environmental and human rights. But you know, the lovely lady Jill behind us, no one is obligating her to come protest, so any threat she has to you guys is, you know, doesn't make any sense. But beyond that, you know, it's all based off of evidence, and I have a lot of it, and this goes to every single person protesting on the Trump side, which is fine. They're allowed to say whatever they want, but they aren't allowed to stand in the middle of the street. They aren't allowed to bring megaphones. They aren't allowed to make verbal and physical assaults. I've been almost run over twice. I was a person that was almost killed in the American Bank while I was just walking. You know, that day, Police Chief Dial, he said it was a huge protest and they were understaffed, but that day there was only 6 of us and there was no Trump protesters. So, you know, I'm not here to cry wolf like other people, because that's not the situation. The situation is to create progress and change and not create more havoc in this town, which I feel like a lot of people are over-exaggerating. It's been pretty peaceful. We are respectful. I have spoken with the majority of you guys and the police officers to make sure the crew that is not the Trump protesters, but the people that stand on this corner, we don't have any foul language and we don't have any offensive signs, which every once in a while it slips out of my mouth and other people. But you know, we're not here driving our huge trucks from Kalispell, Eureka, Polson, and other parts of Flathead County, coal rolling, endangering people on the streets. And you know, back to facts and evidence, I have videos on everything, and I'm not here to bring a huge issue in this town because, as Chief Bill Dial said, they are understaffed, and I don't want to make a huge show in Whitefish and bring it to the national level. So I feel like, you know, you guys want to pass an ordinance from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., which we can't protest then. And, you know, I feel like it's the wrong time to pass this ordinance. You guys could have waited a couple weeks till the days got shorter, till the sunlight was a little bit earlier, and then we wouldn't have this issue. But, you know, the one thing I do agree with on Jill, which she's not the brightest, and that's okay, is that you guys kind of are uniting all of us on different groups because we love our First Amendment right, and that's great. But the fact that, you know, you guys are trying to get us to stop protesting when we've been here for 15 weeks, and the Trump people, who only 5% live in Whitefish, because I'm on the forums, I know where everyone lives, in other cities, you know, they drive out of town, they park in the post office, they park in other places, they bring megaphones, they bring AR-15s that they leave in carts selling flags illegally without a permit. You know, you could bring your gun, you could carry whatever you want, but once you have it in the cart or against a building, it could fall, some kid could grab it, and then you're just gonna have a disaster. So, I mean, I feel like you guys are just concentrating on the wrong things. I've had beer bottles thrown at me. I've been almost run over a few times riding my bike. I don't ride my bike around town anymore for that. And I have, I'd say about 82 plates with photo imagery of people having a 12-pack of White Claw or Budweiser open in their car. And you know, maybe some of you guys in this building are on those photos. So I would just say, let's manage the right things. And that is drunk driving, reckless people. I'm not here to cry wolf, like I said, but certain people in this community love starting things, instigating, and I got proof of all of it. And it's against us. You know, there's only like 7 of us protesting for environmental and human rights. And the fact that they want us to get angry because they think we're not logical thinkers or educated and we'll just start fighting is incorrect. So the fact that they come here from other towns driving in an hour plus in rush hour, because you guys do drive that far, is quite ridiculous just to start shit with us. And I don't think that's fair, you know? So, I mean, if you guys want to solve this issue, maybe just have local people protest. And if people want to drive an hour plus just to make a little Facebook video of trying to start a fight with one of us, you know, it's kind of ridiculous, but I appreciate you guys giving us a chance to speak, because we're going to be protesting till the sun goes down. And as I said, the days are going to get shorter, so maybe in November we'll be here till 4 p.m. and there won't be any issues. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to remind each of us, including the 2 prior speakers, that we have rules for civil discourse. We don't call people's names. We don't do that kind of thing. That's not what we're about here. So I will call you out if that happens again. I appreciate everybody's passions for what they're doing, but we're not going to do that here. All right, shall we? Who wants to be next?
Hey guys. Hello, my name's Megan Klein. I live at 315 Kalispell Ave. So my concern with the ordinance from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. is that a lot of working class citizens who align with our views are people who want to speak their political opinions and make it known. They work until around 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. So giving them 1 or 2 hours to come out and tell people their opinions and speak with people of opposing opinions, and for people to learn about each other and what each other believe in, how to fact check, and just gaining knowledge from each other, which is what these protests are important for, and everybody to exercise their right to protest and their freedom of speech. And so because of that, I think that the ordinance should not go into effect before we maybe try to implement something else like posting guidelines for how to peacefully protest, maybe on the intersection of Baker there and 2nd. So on the signs, I think that we could post, instead of prohibiting protesting, think of some guidelines for safer protesting. So no flag poles that have the ability to obstruct the views of traffic, but handheld flags and signs are okay. I think that we could tell people to stay 3 feet away from the curb, along with signs or anything that could obstruct traffic or the view of traffic. And no megaphones or loud instruments that can be heard when leaving a 30-foot radius. So put a little bit of a parameter on that. And one more thing that we could put on the signs. If people feel unsafe or uncomfortable or offended at the rallies, please remove yourself. And I would be willing to make signs and get them approved, but that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next.
Hi, I'm Catherine Owens. I have P.O. Box 1606. I'd like to just reiterate that Trump rallies are rallies, and they're there to provide inspiration. They're there to provide hope. And what I see from the other side is F Trump. I spoke with one lady last time, and I said, how can I bring my daughters here when you have language like that? And she said, that's your problem, not mine. We have children driving through these intersections, and they see this foul language. That's not Whitefish. And to allow this on our corners, in this beautiful city we live in, this foul language, I don't get that. And I believe, actually I know, that if you take this young lady's advice and ban flagpoles with the American flag, you will have an uprising. I can tell you that right now. You will not. I get that she's saying.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to have a point of order here.
I
Again,
understand.
Just a second, Catherine. With respect to our rules of civil discourse, if you've all taken any notes, clapping, cheering, things like that inhibits the speaker from proceeding and from this council hearing. So we sure appreciate every one of your comments, but we really need to refrain from that. So thank you very much.
I understand that she's saying a small flag. That is just not going to do it. If you want us back off 3 feet, I was told by a friend, Catherine, pull away from the curb. I did, because I am carrying a flagpole, and I had cyclists come down, and I'm pulling it away. We get that. We completely understand that. But telling us not to carry an American flag, not going to be okay. The other thing I want to mention is about 3 months ago, I don't even know, I've lost track of time, when BLM Antifa was at its highest, was at its height, we had a lot of people on the street corners. And I can't believe that Chief Dial wouldn't have received intel that this frequency was going to keep coming. We were seeing these protests in other cities in the country, and certainly he had intel to keep watch of these protests on the corners. So I just find it really peculiar that right now that we've had 2 Trump rallies, today was the 3rd, that all of a sudden the ordinance is coming up, and he's saying he's getting intel now of the frequency. So the timing seems odd to me that after 2 Trump rallies, when maybe less than 100 people at the Trump rally, and then we had the group across the corner, I don't know, maybe a total of 100 people, that all of a sudden we have an ordinance, when certainly there must have been more than 35 people on those corners when BLM was at its highest. I say BLM because I don't know what else to call it. But anyway, I just find that really peculiar. The other thing is, Chief Dial says, ask for a permit. That's not going to change anybody's behavior just because they have a permit. I mean, you just have to trust, and I mean, we all get it. I've seen Biden 2020 signs, a lot more than I've seen F Trump now, but I don't understand how a permit is going to change somebody's behavior on the streets, and that's what he's talking about. I also think that when you ask for a permit, whether they ask for it or we ask for it, we can be turned down. Therefore, that is squashing of our freedom of speech. Right now, we get to ask forgiveness. We don't have to ask permission. So if they want to have a rally, if they want to have a protest, they can, oh no, not tonight, because we've got this going on, we've got this going on, we've got this going on. So you can't have your protest because our police are going to other places tonight. Well, there's a squashing of our freedom of speech on both sides. So I don't have the answer, and your job is really tough. I get it, but the permit is not going to change anything. It's not going to change anything. You're just going to have 35 people on a whole bunch of different corners. Yeah, and I think the timing is really peculiar. It kind of feeds into this left-wing Whitefish idea that Whitefish has become. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you for your time. Next.
Maureen Cordoza, 150 Las Coon Trail, Whitefish. Well, sorry, now I've touched them all, sorry. Well, it'll be about as good as some of the masks, but you know. And for some, mine is good. I have a HEPA filter inside mine. I have medical issues, so I do wear mine when I'm in a tight situation, but otherwise not. Okay, to proceed. What a year 2020 has been. In a matter of months, Americans' rights of freedom has been forever affected. What's happening to our world? If someone is conservative, we can't do or say anything because we hurt someone's feelings or someone takes offense. Since late this past spring, because I couldn't remember the date or the 15 weeks, I've had to tolerate protesters with signs, including profanity, being waved in our faces. I will say, there was still a sign, at least one sign out there, but they were better tonight. I have to be thankful for that. So being waved in our faces as we go by, and some of the people in the cars had children with them. and then being yelled at by some of the protesters in our small town, or purposely, I was in my car and I was the first car, and one of, as you might know, I'm a Trump supporter. On the other side was at the corner, right in front of here of the city hall, and sees me, and I probably had a flag up or something, and they get their sign and they walk over and practically shove it at my windshield. You know, that's unacceptable. And that was right in front of this building. But I'm supposed to tolerate these acts. And I've seen nothing done to stop this. Those that feel like me have to endure the liberal attitudes. Also, the worry of violence, as we've seen in so many other cities. And I agree, I don't want that happening here. I've enjoyed almost 27 years here, and I'm from the Bay Area, and I don't even want to go there. So there were all of these different protesters in town, and it was always there, almost daily. I mean, every time I drove by. Then we had 2 Trump rallies. You heard us singing songs, usually patriotic songs, waving our flags, holding signs without profanity. There was one man in our group, and he was calling the other side a name, and it was disgusting. That's not who I am, and I went to the person that I thought was the leader of it, and I said, would you please ask him to not use that word? I don't want to hear it either. So there are 2 rallies in support of President of the United States, which is Donald J. Trump. Well, there were 2 prior to them asking for, I know there's been 4 now, I know that. And I think you're the gentleman that asked me why I was supporting Trump. But this is also about our nation, not just our city. I want to quote an Interlake article, and the article said that we, the Trump supporters, are there to protest the other side. That is not true. We have a mind of our own. They also say many are armed. Well, I'm talking about the first 2 rallies. I wasn't here last night, but I was out there today. I did not see one weapon. I didn't hear that somebody had it, and I know a lot of the people there. But even though, keep in mind, we do have the right to carry in the state. The state of Montana is an open carry. And if they have a concealed carry, that also. But was there a worry about weapons when it was just the other side? Not that I heard about. On August 30th, 2020, I read another article. This was in the Pilot. And this is when it talked about the headlines. Emergency Ordinance, Council to Vote, Prohibiting Gatherings. That's what was in the paper. I also saw another I think it was actually a post on Facebook, and it was by actually Catherine Owens, and I did not know she'd be here tonight. She's running for Montana House of Representatives for District 5, which is us, which is Whitefish. And she wrote, and this really affected me. The last comment really touched me. This is not about protecting the city, Whitefish. This is about protecting your values. I took that as her meaning, the council, I'm not sure. But I'm asking you, I hope not. I feel I also deserve to say, my husband, who I'm very proud of, is here tonight. He served our country as a Marine. Our son served our country as a Marine for 9 years, including Iraq, Afghanistan, Bosnia, and other dangerous deployments. My brother was a Marine, and he died fighting for our freedoms in Vietnam in 1968. My nephew, also a Marine, was killed in action in Iraq, 2003, the 4th day of the war, earning a Silver Star protecting his men and women. And why? He did it for all of you, all of us, including me. And I don't want to see those freedoms changed. They serve to protect freedom for all Americans and for the rights of all Americans, including mine, and including all of those that support Donald J. Trump or who support Joe Biden. I ask you to allow both sides equal and fair time and rules. Hold both sides to the same standards. I'm proud to be American. I know I've been blessed to be born an American. After almost 27 years living in Whitefish, I am not proud right now to live in Whitefish. I request that you do not limit our rights to meet, to speak, to wave our flags on a pole. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Next. Anybody else? Come. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Susie Moore. I moved to Whitefish in 1977 with my family. I've been a realtor for a long time, 32 years. And what I'm here to talk about is our wonderful community of Whitefish, because I'm very proud of this community. It's got its warts, of course, but it's got so much good to it. And as of May 25th, which was the date of the tragic death of George Floyd, the BLM protesters have hijacked our city corner here at City Hall. It's what we as taxpayers pay for this. And it's really beyond that. It's our tourists, our citizens, our kids, everybody have to go by this corner and see the vulgar messages that this group is putting out. And I know you're asking for not civil, that we keep civil discourse, but I'd like to just say it out loud, the F Trump. There's the one seems to be leader of the pack that is really proud of her ugly and vile caricature of our president that she puts in people's faces when they slow down so they can see this ugliness that she's trying to put out there. There's two differences here. We have the protesters, Black Lives Matter, and we have a rally. And that's in support of our president. It's election year. There's been nothing but good energy that has come from the group and the people. And again, there were only 2 rallies before the ordinance was called. And I'd like to remind Chief Dial, who I've known for a long, long time, it's your rally and your Trumpsters that have the back the blue. The others are defund the police. So keep that in mind when you're trying to get all this figured out. There's nothing but hateful messages. There's an individual in the room tonight that looked at me and said, F you, to me. I've heard it before, but he was very explicit. And so we hear this all the time. And I had a neighbor, I just live a block off State Park Road. And there's this nice guy. I have my signs up on my fence and I have my flag flying. And I get so many compliments like, thank you, for putting myself out there and showing what I believe. And this one young man, father, came by and he said, I stopped to this group. I asked them please to take down those offensive, vulgar signs. I have 2 boys, 10 years old, 11, and I don't like to drive through here night after night. And this is what they see. And I was really surprised when Chief Dial said that he thought they had this under control now with the vulgarity, because Chief, they don't. They do not. And I had an incident last night. I was on the corner of American Bank and I had my Trump flag and I was there with other rally people, and this individual on a skateboard came whipping through us, and he grabbed my flag and he took off down towards Mambo's, Then he crossed the street, and he was really proud of himself because I'm the oldest one, I'm 78. So I was the oldest one in the group there, so he picked the old lady so he could grab her flag, I guess. But anyway, down he went, and I thought, well, you know, there goes the flag. But we had 2 officers that were somewhere nearby, and Jeff Underwood, who is a retired state trooper, he was kind of standing by me with the back the blue sign, and he said, just a minute. Well, anyway, somehow he waved them over, and there's 2 officers came, and they got the guy. And it just warmed my heart, you know, the heck with the flag. I did get it back. It's damaged, of course. And here's this jerk sitting on his ass down up by across from Mambo's, while these 2 officers have to stop him for what he's done. You know, their messages are hateful. And they asked me, well, did I want to file a complaint, which I did. So he was charged with disorderly conduct. And then they wanted to know if I wanted to file charges, and I did not. But this is a group of hate. Their messages are hate. They don't love their country. You'd see that these people sitting in the room tonight didn't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance because they don't pledge allegiance to our flag. I don't know if you noticed that or not. Now, we did have our rally group have megaphones, and we had a bullhorn. The music that they were playing, if you want to call it music, I don't know, is just nasty stuff that they had blaring on the corner. And that's gone on since May 25th. And because I have to drive by here night after night after night, and I want to say when this first started, when the Black Lives Matter group first got out after George Floyd's death, there's a woman here tonight that was actually dragging our American flag. The flag was upside down on the pole, which I understand is a sign of distress for our country, and she was dragging it on the street in front of this group. And that group has stayed there since May 25th. This is what our visitors see. This is what our tourists see. This is our beautiful community of Whitefish. That is more concern to me is how long or when our hours are regulated as to when we can come out and show our rallies and our enthusiasm and our love for our country. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
My name is Kim Porter, and I live at 200 Lost Coon Trail. And one of the things is I also want to make clear that they're not just Trump rallies, they're rallies for our nation. And Susie, what you said about the American flag is what I find so disheartening, I guess, and makes my soul sick, is that it's become something in our nation now that is dividing people. And that makes me very sad, is our flag should bring us together. And on the other side, there isn't even a flag that I've seen in the times that I've been there. There isn't even, that I've noticed, a vote for Biden, because everything's been F Trump and grab your pussy, pardon me. So if you think the vulgar signs are gone, they're not. You can walk down there right now and look at them all. These people are, the young man that left has been slapping his thigh. There's no respect there whatsoever for the things that have been said. I've had conversations with some of them. They have admitted to being paid for their time there. Now, that's just something they've told me. So whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that's something that they have stated, that they've been paid for the whole time they've been there. And I just wanted to state that as a tax-paying citizen of Flathead County in the state of Montana, that setting up this ordinance that you're talking about, it goes against the Montana State Constitution, Article 2, Section 6, that says we have the right to assemble. And I can understand the wanting to limit the time to 7 o'clock, especially as the time of the election is getting closer. And after I listened to the mumbling of the young man that seemed a little, had a hard time understanding what all he was saying, I'm thinking it might be safe to actually limit the time that we're out there, because it makes me concerned for our safety, for the people who are on the other side. I'm a tad nervous after listening to that. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ma'am?
My speech is going to be a little strong. I'm a 20-year Marine vet, Master Gunner Sergeant, 4 generations in the Marines. And so I appreciate where you're coming from, Marine.
Ma'am, just for the record, at this time, could you please give us your name and address for the record?
I'll give you my first name. I was threatened by the gentleman that just left 3 weeks ago, so I'm not, my name is Shelby.
Thank you.
So if this is hard to take, bear with me, because I have a right to my speech. I was going to say honorable mayor and distinguished city council members, but there isn't anything honorable or distinguished about any of you sitting before us tonight. Let me finish. You all hide behind your masks like cowards. The city council belongs to the people of Whitefish. We sponsor your position. We pay for your salaries. We pay Montana taxes. We own businesses, and we support jobs in our community. It is because of us, the people, that any of you even have your position. Lest you forget, you work for us. And yet, you think you have the right to dictate to the people regarding masks, and now an emergency ordinance prohibiting gatherings and demonstrations during the hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. How dare you sell out the very people that you swore an oath to serve? You have no integrity, you have no honor, and you don't have any respect for your constituents. Whitefish, Montana is not Portland, it's not Seattle, it's not Denver, it's not Chicago, and it's not New York. We are a small community. We live and let live. If you don't have the courage to stand up for the very people that you are supposed to serve, then you don't deserve to be our mayor or our city council members. No one, foreign or domestic, will dictate to the free people of Montana. We live in America, the land of the free because of the brave. I gave 20 years of my life to the Marine Corps to protect and defend the right for every American, let me repeat that, for every American to peacefully assemble, whether I agree with them or not. I fought for that. The vigilante terrorist groups such as Antifa and BLM, with the beating, the looting, and the killing people, will not dictate to us our American right to peaceably assemble. Mr. Mayor and council members, you are now dictating to the people regarding hours they can assemble, what equipment they can use. You're limiting attendance and requiring permits. Excuse me, but when did Whitefish become a communist community? Whitefish has become a controlled and sterilized community. We can't even love our flag. This community is no longer for the people of Montana. I want to move. That's how bad it's gotten here. So I encourage you, Mr. Mayor, to grow a set, and you city council members to get a backbone and stand up for the people that you were elected to serve. The honest and hardworking people of this community deserve better than this. A storm is brewing, whether you see it or not, and you better stand up for us or you're going to be kicked to the curb. And one more thing, don't ever forget that you work for us, the people. And I just want to tell you, 3 weekends ago, me and another gentleman came down here by Casey's in Northern on the sidewalk. I had an American flag and a Trump flag, and I was shoved. So I called the cops. And the gentleman that's here right now, I won't mention his name, taunted me with another gentleman. The cops came out and the cops just shooed them away. Chief Dial, the cops shooed them away, and they interrogated me for a half an hour. So you tell me where the rights of the people are in this community. I couldn't be more disgusted with our policing here. I am just appalled. And you talk about, Chief Dial, police yourself. We came down here, 2 people with 2 flags, just to say we're grateful and we love our president. And they came and shoved us and you did nothing. And then, to make it worse, the police officer just kept saying, what do you want us to do? What do you want us to do? I was so disgusted. So the fact that our chief says everybody needs to police yourselves, we do. But there's instigators that come and they don't respect us, and that crosses the line. And I was shoved, a 20-year Marine vet. And I controlled myself. I called the police right away, and I ended up being interrogated. So you tell me where that's right, Chief Dial. After being assaulted, and then when I wanted to press charges, you know what the officer said? Can't we all just get along in the sandbox? Seriously? Assaulted? And I'm telling you what, there's a storm brewing, and you guys better wake up, because this isn't about one side or the other. It's about disrespect. It's about their way or no way. And all we're doing is cowering to their rights while we're losing ours. And I will not put up with it. So God bless America. God bless this community, and everybody better stand up. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next.
Yenny Alba. I'm at 616 Wisconsin. I spoke earlier. I hope no one gets assaulted while we're all out there demonstrating whatever it is that we believe, but I've heard a lot of people complain about getting shoved. And the BLM protesters, we're still protesting the fact that our brown and black siblings and community members are getting killed. So if you put this ordinance into place, that's what you're limiting. You're limiting our freedom to speak up against black and brown people being killed for no reason. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Any additional comments? One shot at this deal. Thank you so much. Sir, this is a public comment. Everybody gets their right to say. We have rules of civil discourse, and I appreciate your concerns. Now, who else would like to speak? Any other public comment? Bridger, do we have anybody outside that would like to talk? Pardon? Nope? All right, and with that, I think I'll close. Going once, going twice, going 3 times. All right, with that, I'm going to close the public hearing, and we're going to take about a 15-minute break, and we'll come back to council for consideration of this matter in about 15 minutes, so about 20 minutes of 9. Thank you. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to call the city council back to order. You take your seats. We've closed the public hearing on what would be an ordinance 2012, potentially an emergency ordinance prohibiting the organized gatherings and demonstrations not subject to a special event permit. And I now turn it back to council for a motion, conversation, or considerations. Thank you. Steve.
I have a couple of questions first, if that's all right, for staff. The first one is, not sure who it's for, but what is the recourse for an unauthorized gathering? So we have a law that says if you have, 75 people, you have to get a permit. What is the recourse if there's a gathering of 75 and there's no permit?
We do have penalties built into the ordinance. The problem is it's kind of hard to administer. Who are we going to charge? You know, if we have somebody that comes out as the group leader and we say, well, you know, you didn't get a permit, then it's easy to enforce a penalty. When nobody comes out as the organizer, it's hard to enforce. I think it's also hard to enforce when there's not necessarily anybody organizing, they're just people coming together. So, you know, from a practical matter, it's very, very difficult to enforce that ordinance. But, you know, we would like people to get permits. I think for our police resources, knowing how many people are going to be there, where they're going to be, what time they're going to be there, it makes their lives easier. As a city, we can place some conditions on special use permits. Somebody spoke to us denying a special use permit. To the best of my knowledge, we've never denied a special event permit. We didn't even deny the Nazi special event permit. We just put conditions on it. So Steve, enforcement-wise, it's very, very difficult to enforce that.
Okay, don't go anywhere. I have another question, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Carry on.
And this one, I mean, obviously, we can't be the first city in Montana in this situation. Is there some case law in the state that we can look at in terms of whether this is actually something we can do constitutionally? Kind of at a loss with that one.
Sure, there's a plethora of a case law. I'm not necessarily in the state, but United States Supreme Court case law that says reasonable time, manner, and place restrictions, as long as we have a significant government interest in mind, they are enforceable. So it's dating back for years and years and years.
Okay, I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Ben?
Oh, one more, Angie. Sorry. Does the police department currently have sufficient authority to disperse the crowd in the event that it does get excessively unruly or dangerous or too large or something along those lines? Or maybe that's a question for Chief Dial, sorry.
You can ask Chief Dial.
Okay.
I mean, I know we can cite people for disorderly conduct, but as far as just dispersing, you know, a large group of people and it's not one particular individual, I'll let the chief answer that.
Okay, sorry, thank you.
Ben, I couldn't hear your question over there.
Yeah, my question was, do you have the legal power currently to disperse the crowd in the event that it becomes either too unruly or too dangerous or too large or something along those lines?
Yes, we do, but it would be difficult at best.
No doubt. Thank you.
Anything else for me?
Any other questions for Chief Dial? Any other? Rebecca?
I just would like you to just explain again how many disorderly conduct, what is that, a citation? And how many assaults we've already experienced to date? Please.
And Bridger, I think Bridger can answer this better than me. I believe 2 disorderlies and 2 disturbing the peace, or maybe 3 disturbing the peace. Is that about right?
Yeah, I don't know if I could say the difference between disorderly or disturbing the peace. They're kind of the same. One's a state statute, one's a city ordinance, but we have not had any reported assaults. Yes, one assault with charges filed. And we've had
night's incident. I believe it's 4 total.
We've had a lot of people say, well, this happened to me, this happened, like the lady who was in here tonight that said she was assaulted. I had no knowledge of that. And I don't know if there was a report done on it, so.
If we have future incidents, what is an appropriate way for a citizen to report that to our police to keep our peace? Like, how is someone supposed to handle that you would like to see?
If a person is assaulted, they should seek us out. The best time to do it, if they're not in imminent danger or they don't feel that they're going to be assaulted again, they could do it after. But if not, we're always around. Flag us down. We'd be more happy to take a person's statement and then talk to the prosecutor about it.
Anything else for staff?
I have one other thing. It's for Angie.
Okay.
So, Angie, we're still under an emergency ordinance at a statewide level and a citywide level for COVID.
Are you talking about the mask ordinance, Rebecca?
Yep.
So we're under a governor's directive with respect to the mask ordinance. Our mask ordinance as a city expired.
Right. Okay. So we still are in an emergency situation, though, with COVID.
With respect to the governor's directive, yes. And I think unless we get down to 4 or below active cases, the governor's directive remains in effect.
Okay. And the second thing was I asked Councilor Hennon, maybe I will just ask Councilor Hennon, but it's MCA 477102 subsection 2, and it has to do with how citizens actually treat elected officials. So would it be easier if Ryan is an attorney, so he knows all this stuff too?
Angie, it's the threats and other improper influences in official and public matters.
Okay.
Threatens harm to harm any public servant and with an intent to influence the public servant's decision, opinion, recommendation, or vote, or otherwise exercise of discretion. Rebecca asked me for it. I don't think that happened here tonight. I'm not concerned about that. I mean, yeah, there were personal attacks, but I truly don't care what people think about me. And if I have a spine or not, I'll notice that they're not here anymore. But that's the statute she's referencing. I'm not concerned about it, but that's just the one for the record.
Okay.
Thank you. The reason why I brought it up is I think there's a big educational component to this with the citizens, that there's a certain amount of propriety, that we go through when we're doing leadership in the city. And so one of the inappropriate things is to threaten or we expect some pushback, but it shouldn't be personal. We're making decisions for the whole community. And that's why I told you, I wanted you to read that so people know you have to sort of act civil when we're making community decisions. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Any other questions for me?
I think we're good. Thank you, Angie.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion.
Please.
So I would make a motion that we deny ordinance number 20 I'm not sure what number it is. 12. An emergency ordinance prohibiting organized gathering not subject to special event permit after 7 p.m. and prohibiting the use of amplified sound.
Do I have a second?
I will second that.
Want to speak to your motion?
I will. I have a lot of things to say here, so please bear with me. The first is that someone in the audience tonight said something about some people are too easily offended. Well, I'm very offended tonight as I sit here as an elected official, duly elected official of this town, because I was told that I don't have any honor. And I get it, there's a lot of ways to serve this country. Some people put their neck on the line and go fight. Some people decide that they want to help run their town and help make rules and keep the public safe, and they stick their neck out and they try to get elected to do those things. And every single one of us up here did that. And so I'm offended by that. I'm also a public school teacher, and I have been for 20 years. There's a lot of service that goes into teaching our young citizens of this country. And so I'm offended that I would be called dishonorable tonight. And it's a shame that the person who said that's not here anymore. I hope that she watches this and can at least accept the fact that maybe those words were poorly chosen. The other thing I think is important is that we need to clear up a couple misconceptions, because there's, unfortunately in this country, the conspiracy theories have run rampant, and they come from the very top. There is no effort in this community to defund the police of this community. Not a single effort at all. We are blessed to have the people that serve us in this community, in our police force, and our firefighters, and all the way down the line to the staff that sits here with us tonight and do the work of managing a burgeoning city with very few resources in a period of explosive growth, economic meltdown, and worldwide pandemic. There is no effort to defund the police here. There's also nothing nefarious about this ordinance. This is about public safety. I get it. It's unsafe out there. When I ride my bike into town and there's 3 people waving giant flags on the corner, I can't see. And people can't see if they're making turns. It's also distasteful at best to see vulgar signs every weekend on the corner. If it's about that, we can clean that stuff up. I don't think we need this ordinance to do that. This is not about flags. This is not about who is more patriotic or who is right in this election. What this is about, it's about the balance between public safety and our freedom as Americans in this country. And unfortunately, we've had very poor leadership on what that balance means for the last 6 to 8 months, since the beginning of this worldwide pandemic. And several people don't think that it's their responsibility to wear a mask in public. And they have the misconception that wearing a mask is because you think you're going to get sick. It's not about that. It's about the fact that you may be a carrier and you may unintentionally spread the disease even though you have no symptoms. And it's unfortunate that some people are so selfish that they can't see that and they think their rights in this override the rights of other people to stay safe. And I put my life on the line every day as a public school teacher in Kalispell now. And I sit and I wear a mask and I spray tables in between every class period. I wipe all the computers at the end of the day, and I don't feel safe. So when people come in here and tell me I'm dishonorable, I take offense to that. So why did I make a motion to deny this? Well, my motion to deny is based on the very freedom that we expect in the First Amendment. I don't think that limiting what's going on out there is going to solve a problem. I think it's going to invite our police force into more conflict with the citizenry. I think it's unfortunate that people are out there making lots of noise on a busy corner, obstructing views with flags, having distasteful and vulgar signs, courting giant trucks to come and do burnouts and just make laps around our city. All of those things make it much less safe to be a citizen of Whitefish. And it would be nice if, like Chief Dial said, people would police themselves. From the idea of driving their big diesel trucks and doing burnouts, all the way down to wearing a mask when you are in a public space. So, This ordinance clearly, to me, violates the First Amendment, and I can't support it for that. We have the right to protest, we have the right to peaceably assemble, and we should all have that right. And we should all also do it with public safety in mind rather than ourselves in mind and our personal agendas. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak to the motion? Rebecca?
Okay, so I am in favor of the motion because our mayor and our chief of police, our city manager discussed it, and they felt like we were possibly entering into an unsafe few months if we don't put some parameters around how people are behaving in front of our city hall. It's one of our busiest intersections in town. This is me coming to City Hall for years and years and years. We love public comment. We love it that people feel strongly about their political party or about protecting people that have died by murder. And we love it when people actually feel like they can make a difference in the world. So this, to me, voting in favor of this in no way means limit that at all. But what I have heard tonight is that people have had shoving, they've been shoved, they've had beer bottles thrown at them, they've had flags stolen from them, they've been pushed, they've been screamed at. So we have a chance to maybe put some containment around these interactions in the next 2 months before the election, and I think it would be safer for our community. I'm going to read something because I just want people to remember this. You are the government too. U.S. citizens not only have rights to gather and speak freely, but citizens also have responsibilities in our society to behave appropriately to the situation. We are still in an emergency situation called a pandemic. Regardless of how people educate themselves as to the reality of this situation, we have emergency laws in place to protect our citizens from contracting COVID-19. We have had to do this, as surreal and difficult as it has been, for over 6 months now. We have essentially shut down our visitation, closed our schools, stopped meeting in person, and learned many new public health protocols, including distancing from each other, covering our faces, cleaning our hands, and disinfecting our environments. Just because we have an election in a little under 2 months does not mean that we can afford to reduce our vigilance. We have now lost 6 residents of our care center. Likely by now, hundreds of citizens in Whitefish have contracted COVID-19 because it came to our community in December when testing was unavailable, and most everyone has come through it well. But flu season is ahead, and we literally have people coming here from all over the world. Safety for our citizens needs to remain our primary goal at this time. People who gather outside our city hall are not wearing face coverings, nor are they maintaining a safe distance from one another. These people are not following the public health directives that we as a community believe to be based on the best available science. Public health, unfortunately, has come into conflict with the right to gather, speak freely, and because of that, and because of the way that people intentionally ignore COVID-19 precautions, it's become dangerous. To that end, I'm voting in favor of this restriction on gathering, I guess, from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. for 2 months. There are other ways to campaign and to hold vigilance for a purpose. Signs, voter registration, phone banking, money raising, etc. These can all be done safely without jeopardizing the health of our community. And that's one of the favorite parts of the public process, is to listen to other people's perspectives about how to solve our collective problems. and that includes who will lead us into our future. But I will not condone unsafe behaviors, and by limiting gatherings now, this may help to create a more civil discourse during a very challenging year. We've had assaults already, we've had thefts already, we've had a lot of offended people in our town, but we need to learn to be respectful of differences, because the differences are really important when you're a part of a community for the future. We need to have a space where we can actually listen to each other despite our differences. And if every time everybody's pointing the finger at the other person for being wrong, you will not hear them, because your mind is going you, not what do we have here together? And I think that's been somewhat intentional over the last probably year, because we're going into a major election, but it's really unhealthy in the long run to do that. So I'd like to challenge everybody that's listening, everybody that showed up tonight, to be your best self, not your worst. Do not point fingers at someone else for being wrong. They're responsible for themselves. But you lift other people up. If you strongly believe in a candidate, then you make sure other people believe in that candidate too. If you strongly believe that people should not be murdered, then stay still and steady in that stance. But we need everybody to be their best self now, not to erode our community with any kind of hate or violence. And so I really believe in our government. I know that sounds corny, but it's one of the most beautiful things in the world when we actually listen to each other and find solutions. And it never lasts if it comes through violence. You have to learn how to be peaceful, and you have to learn how to have civil discourse so people's opposing views are integrated into the final solutions that we're looking to achieve as a community and as a nation. So that's my little, sorry, went long, but I feel really strongly about this. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Rebecca. Any other comments to see? Ryan?
I will be supporting Steve's motion, but perhaps for different reasons. I will say that I agree with Angie that I have no doubts whatsoever really about the constitutionality of this ordinance. I think it is allowed. The United States Supreme Court has held numerous times that time, place, and manner restrictions of content and viewpoint neutral speech does not run afoul of the First Amendment. Numerous cities across the country have ordinances like this. I don't think we'd be on any shaky legal ground. I think that an ordinance like this would lead to an increase in gatherings. I think you would have twice the amount of gatherings, people just intentionally trying to violate the ordinance as a middle finger to the city or to the police or whomever. And I don't think that's the best thing for our law enforcement. I think it would lead to more police encounters. I do understand the intent behind it and the sentiment behind it, I really do. But I just think in practice, an enforcement of this ordinance would do more harm than good. So for that reason, I will be voting in favor of Steve's motion in voting against this emergency ordinance.
Thank you, Ryan. Ben?
I feel that the right of peaceful assembly, peaceful protest, peaceful demonstrations, whatever we want to call it, is as American as it gets. And I think there's been a lot of good things that have happened in our country as a result of that. And in my mind, it's not something to discourage. It's something to encourage. And so as a rulemaking body, I think we owe great deference to that in terms of trying to avoid situations where we would be even perceived as abridging people's speech, unless it's really necessary to do so. It is my view, and the reason why I support Steve's motion is that I do feel this ordinance might be a little bit premature. I think that I don't like hearing the reports of the fights and stuff happening out there. I think it's ridiculous. But I do think that if folks care enough to stand out there and protest or demonstrate for things that they believe, I think that if we can allow that to happen, we should. And so that's the one reason, is I think it's a little premature. The second reason is I also think that if we were to pass this, the situation out there would probably not be much different after we pass it than if we did not pass it, excuse me. And so I kind of wonder really what the effectiveness of it would be, kind of like Ryan said. So I think that, Chief Dial, I know this does not make your job easier if this does not pass, and I think want to acknowledge that and say thank you from all of us for putting up with all of this, and the rest of the police force for helping us stay safe. So I will not be supporting this ordinance. Thank you.
Andy?
I'll try and be brief because everybody's stated it all very, very well. And I'm going to support Steve's motion too. And it's simply not because I don't support Bridger and the chief and all of our officers, because I think they do a great job for us. But I do agree with Ryan, and I am concerned that this might actually be fanning the flames a little bit. I think it would be a problem. And I think anything in any form, constitutionally or legally correct, that does inhibit free speech, I have a problem with that personally, I have to admit. And I don't like to see some kinds of speech, but I respect people's right to go ahead and do that. I do get upset, as Steve did, when people say that we have no honor and we're just up here and they pay our salaries. Well, once again, we don't get paid, people. I don't know how many times we have to say that. We volunteer our time. We work really hard, and we have to listen to people that ridicule us, that tell us that we need to grow a pair. Downright nasty things, right? And you know what? We don't get paid. We do it for the love of our community, and it's our job to represent all of the people of this community. And when someone stands up there and says, you're here to represent all of the people as long as we agree with them, that's the problem with everything that happens today. Because we do. It's our job to provide safety for this community. It's our job to provide municipal services. It's our job to provide parks and libraries and all of those things, and none of that comes easy. It's very, very difficult, and it's a lot of interests and needs to balance. And the same people that are saying, well, just put more police out there as well, you know what, then you should pay more taxes. And you know what? All of us have jobs, last time I checked. Some of us have companies. Some of us work for public institutions. We all work really hard. We pay taxes too. We pay utilities. We do all of those things. We're not somebody that's just up here because, oh, wow, this is a great thing to do. That's not it at all. And then you see how things just get blown up. One comment, ban flags. I didn't read anything in here where we were banning flags. I didn't quite see that. So now the things that come out on social media, oh, they're going to ban flags. Someone else said, oh, one of the people told me they admitted to being paid. Well, I don't know if it's true or not. Well, people didn't hear the I don't know if it's true or not. What they heard is somebody admitted to being paid. So now the people are out there thinking, oh, wow, somebody got paid. You know, and I think somehow personal beliefs and personal liberty have been adopted as patriotism, and quite frankly, it sickens me. Maureen said she's had family members lose their lives for this country. Those people do it for all of us. Do it for everybody, regardless of what church they go to, regardless of what synagogue they go to, regardless of what mosque they go to. They do it for America. And you know, we all just need to buck up and think what it would be like if you lived in Malden, Washington today, where 80% of your town burned to the ground yesterday, or if you lived in Staten, Oregon, or if you lived in Sublimity, Oregon, and they're all completely evacuated right now. Century farms of families that are burning to the ground, and people are in here complaining about not being able to wave their flag possibly past 7 o'clock. Grow up. Just absolutely grow up. It just incenses me, I have to say. And we need to get a grip as a nation. We need to get a grip as a community. And I should probably shut up now because it just makes me mad. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and support the motion. And There you go.
Thank you, Andy. Anybody else have any further comments? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Are you in favor or opposed to the motion, Rebecca? I'm opposed to the motion. Okay. The motion passes 5-1. Councilor Norton in opposition. Thank you. Now I think it's time for us to return to regular order. With that, I'd like to call for consideration of our public hearing on resolution, or what will be our resolution 2012, a resolution discontinuing, abandoning, and vacating an unimproved portion of Lookout Ridge.
I think that would be 2013, Frank.
Pardon?
20, is it? I thought 2012 was the one we just did.
Resolution 2034.
Oh, it's
Your
resolution.
next ordinance will be since you denied this last one, the next ordinance will be 2012.
Good, thank you for correcting me. Thank you. Craig.
Good evening, Honorable Deputy Mayor and distinguished council members. Here tonight to talk about the vacation of a portion of Lookout Ridge Road. I'm going to make this as brief as possible, realizing that we've already had a long evening. But Lookout Ridge LLC does own approximately 250 acres of land just north of Whitefish. I think we're all familiar with the property and the project that the owners are working on, which essentially kind of amounts to a private resort. It has a number of different uses, including a water park and an equestrian facility. Whitefish Lookout Road is the road that dissects that property, and the vast majority of it is owned by that property owner. However, there is a small section of that roadway that is still owned by the city of Whitefish. We've never maintained it, and there really isn't any public access to that section of roadway. So earlier this summer, Lookout Ridge LLC did file a written petition requesting that the city discontinue and abandon this portion of Whitefish Lookout Road, and that is all depicted in the enclosed resolution. The road is also, I should note, used by Iron Horse to access and maintain their water tank. Iron Horse is on a private water system, and there is an easement that will remain in place allowing them to use that section of roadway. So the discontinuance of this road would not prevent Iron Horse from accessing and maintaining their water tank. So Montana Code annotated does provide that City Council may discontinue a street or any part thereof upon written petition of the owners, so long as it can be done without detriment to the public. Staff has reviewed this request, and we do not believe there is any detriment to the public by vacating this section of roadway. So with that, we do respectfully request that you adopt, and I apologize, is it Resolution 2013?
2034.
2034, well, I wasn't even close. Vacating the section of Whitefish Lookout Road.
Council, any questions for Craig?
Craig, how did we end up with that?
Really don't know. I think it may have been an error in original platting. Likely a legal description that wasn't entirely accurate, and so the plat room filed that short little section under the city's ownership, but honestly, I don't think it was ever meant to be.
Craig, have you talked with Iron Horse? Are they aware that we're going to do this, and are they unaffected by it?
You know, I have not had a conversation with Iron Horse.
Okay.
But I've had conversations with the attorneys that represent Lookout Ridge LLC, and they're, you know, very aware that that easement exists and don't in any way intend to take away their rights to access their water tank.
And their right to access it had nothing to do with the small piece of...
No, honestly, they need to utilize other sections of the road to get to the water tank that aren't owned by the city, that easement does cover.
Okay, good. Thank you. Rebecca, you have a question?
Craig, is there any reimbursement for it, or is it just, we're just giving it to them?
There is not any monetary exchange in this. We'd just be vacating it through this resolution.
Okay, any other questions for Craig? With that said, we advertised for a public hearing on what will be our resolution 2034, a resolution discontinuing, abandoning, and vacating an unimproved portion of Lookout Ridge. Is there anyone that wishes to give public comment at this time? Please.
Try and wipe this down for you, but this thing's really wet, and I don't know if I want to wipe it, so that's all right. All right. I apologize.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. My name is Wally Wilkinson, and I am here just as a representative for Lookout Ridge LLC. My address is 1328 River Horse Court in Kalispell. Also have an office at 20 West 2nd Street here in town. Maybe I can answer one of your questions. I have talked to Iron Horse in regards to this abandonment. I've talked to the water operator that actually services the water tank, and we've already drafted the easement. I've given Iron Horse a copy of that easement that would gain them the right to be able to utilize this road. It's kind of an odd situation. Originally, it was a county road all the way to the top of what we call Lookout Ridge, close to where the main house is being built up there. When that property was annexed prior to the current owner having it, when it was going to be a subdivision, what that did is it threw that portion of road into the city's jurisdiction. We actually started this abandonment probably a year ago with a county attorney looked at it and said, we can't do anything with it because it's on city ground. But just to, still half that road or 3/4 of that road is still a county maintained, or not a county maintained, but a county dedicated road, Whitefish Lookout Road, which is Iron Horse's egress to get out for emergency access. The portion we're abandoning is basically all owned by Lookout Ridge LLC. And we've had problems up there in the past years with people trespassing and just hiking, biking, whatever it might be. So I think it would be better served to have this road abandoned, just so we try to mitigate any more unlawful access onto the property. So that's really the gist of kind of how this worked out.
Thank you, sir.
You bet, thanks.
Any other public comment this evening? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment portion of this, on this hearing, and turn it back to council for a motion.
I would move that we approve resolution number 20-34.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion?
None.
All right, call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Like sign. And it passes unanimously. Michelle, thank you. Next item on our public hearings is a consideration of a request by Ron Nash of Montana Creative on behalf of Pamela Green for a conditional use permit to construct an accessory apartment above a garage located at 35 Columbia Avenue.
Good evening.
Hillary, thank you.
I will keep it short, given the hour. So this is an accessory apartment that would be constructed above a new garage that's replacing an existing garage. There's an existing single-family home on the property already. And the access is from East First Avenue, even though the address is on Columbia. Surrounding land uses are also residential with the same WR2 two-family residential zoning. And the growth policy designates this area as urban, which is consistent with the zoning. Overall, the proposed use complies with the WR2 zoning district and conforms with the development standards for accessory apartments. The garage structure itself will be 600 square feet or less, and so it can use the accessory building setbacks. 3 off-street parking spaces are required, which it seems that they can meet, and that will be confirmed at the time of the building permit. The proposed use is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. There are a lot of accessory apartments in this area, and the design is consistent with also surrounding properties. So In the August Planning Board meeting, staff recommended approval of the conditional use permit, subject to 7 conditions. Of interest, like any other ADU, the property will be deed restricted so that the accessory apartment can't be rented unless the owners are in the primary residence. Planning Board adopted the staff report with findings of fact and unanimously recommended approval. Do you have any questions? I'll keep it at that.
Any questions for Hillary? None? Thank you. We announced a public hearing on this matter. At this point, I'd like to open the public hearing. Is there anyone that wishes to give public comment at this time? Going once, going twice, 3 times. With that, I will close the public hearing and turn it back to council for a motion. Ryan.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I would move to approve consideration of a request by Ron Nash of Montana Creative on behalf of Pamela Green for a conditional use permit to construct an accessory apartment above a garage located at 35 Columbia Avenue, Zone WR2, 2-family residential district, WCUP 20-12.
And adopting the findings of fact, the staff report, and the 7 conditions of approval?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is any discussion, and do you wish to speak to your motion? Nope. All those in favor? All those opposed, like sign. And it passes unanimously. Thank you. Next item on our public hearings is a consideration of a request from Troy Corps for a conditional use permit to construct an accessory apartment above the garage located at 25 Oregon Avenue.
Okay,
Really?
very similar to the last one. However, the owners in this case do not live in Whitefish. One of the parents lives directly across the street, and so they plan to use this apartment for family. And they are aware that they will be deed restricted to not allow any rentals unless the primary owners are living in the house. Right now, the existing garage is larger than 600 square feet, and so they're actually going to modify it so that it meets those accessory standards, and then the apartment will be built above that garage. Surrounding land uses are residential with WR2 zoning on 3 sides, and the WRR1, which is the low-density resort residential to the west across Oregon Avenue. Growth policy, again, designates the area as urban, and that's consistent with the WR2 zoning. The project was noticed and had no comments until just today when I received a comment from a neighbor in opposition to the project. You have a copy of that email in your information from Michelle, I believe. And overall, the proposed use complies with the zoning and the development standards for accessory apartments. 3 off-street parking spaces, again, are required, and there's an existing parking area that's gravel right now, which will be required to be paved. And then in addition to those 2 spaces, they also have the spaces in the garage. Again, this is a use that's compatible with the surrounding area. Similar uses, residential and resort residential in the area. Again, at the August Planning Board meeting, staff recommended approval, subject to 8 conditions, some of which include, like I said, the deed restriction so that they can't rent the property without living in the main house, and also that they'll have to pave the parking area. Planning Board adopted the staff report with findings of fact and unanimously approved the recommended approval of the request. Any questions on this one?
I have one.
Yep.
The current house, the owner does not live in it.
Right.
But they're renting it.
I don't know if they're renting it.
Okay.
What I know is that they want to add this accessory apartment to use for family of the owners,
Right.
and that they have family living across the street. I don't know what the status of the primary house is.
Right.
That's my house, and my aunt-in-law lives there, and we just live across the street now, and so we're just trying to, they're getting older, they're 80 and 78, so we're trying to keep everyone in the same neighborhood, so.
Right. Okay.
That's going on with the house, it's just.
Okay.
My aunt lives there, my mother-in-law lives across the street,
Thank you. Answers the question.
Okay. What's that?
Do we need to repeat what he said into the record since he wasn't on the mic?
Just a point of order, I think we can ask him to make his comments during the public comment period.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions for staff other than mine? At this time, I'd open the public hearing on this matter, and if you would come and make those comments on the record, I would sure appreciate it. Thank you.
My name is Troy Core. I own the property at 25 Oregon Avenue. Like I said earlier, my wife and I we're planning on relocating back to Whitefish from Bozeman here in the next maybe 5 years. So we will be living in the house, and then we're going to try to move my aunt with the sisters to be in one house. So when they get older, they don't have to go to a nursing home. And so we're just trying to have a small place right now so we can come up and live with them and hang out with them while they're in their older years. So
Thank you.
that's about it, really. Pretty basic.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Any other public comment this evening? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing on this matter and turn it back to council for a motion, if I could. Andy.
I would move we approve WCUP 20-11 findings of fact, associated staff report, subject to the 8 conditions of approval as recommended to us by our own Whitefish Planning Board on their August 2020 meeting. Wow, that's pretty cool.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Hennon. Any other discussion on this matter? All those in favor? All those opposed, like sign. Again, this motion passes unanimously. Thank you. I would like to take item E, or what was our item E, out of order. Given the lateness, I want to make sure we get through the things that we have to get through from a timing perspective. So I'd like to move resolution, or what will be resolution, I guess, 20-35, a resolution updating the Legacy Homes Program fee in lieu and purchase prices and rentals up, so we can take care of that now and move on with the others as time allows. Any opposition to that? Okay, let's do it.
Okay, so in 2019, you folks adopted the Legacy Home Program. This program, of course, requires 20% of certain residential developments to provide affordable housing. As part of that program, the council adopted our administrative procedures, and there's an appendix in there that identified the price range for ownership, rental, and the fee in lieu, and then the 1.5 times fee in lieu. So these prices and rental rates are derived from the AMI, area median income for Flathead County, that's established annually by the federal government through HUD. And the fee in lieu is based on the 3-year average of sales in the multiple listing service in the 59937, the average square footage of the home sold, as well as the AMI. And that information is, the sales price and the square footage comes from the Northwest Montana Association of Realtors. So when you adopted these numbers, we recognize that every year these numbers would be updated annually, and so that's the report that you're receiving today. So the fee in lieu has increased by about 6%, and the average home price and monthly rental rates also went up by about 6%. So you have a resolution in your packet that's got the details of those prices and changes. And I also have the Excel spreadsheet if you're interested in looking at that in a little bit more detail.
Thank you. Any questions for Wendy?
Wendy, do you have a comparison from what it was before, so that we can see the dollar amount change?
So on the last page of my staff report, which is page 316 of 381, does show the average rent, which is the 70% area median income, and then the average house, which is 100% area median income, the 2019 to the 2020. So this is in order to keep pace with changing incomes as well as changing prices for homes.
Okay, thank you.
Wendy, were these numbers pulled pre-COVID, during COVID, in terms of median incomes, those kinds of things?
The housing price is from 2019, so January to December of 2019. So every year annually, we'll look at those numbers, and it's a 3-year average. And then the AMI, that comes from the federal government, that comes from HUD, and those numbers were released in April. So next year might be a little different. Yeah.
Any other questions? We published this for a public hearing. At this time, I'd like to open the public hearing on what will be our resolution number 20-35, resolution updating Legacy Homes Program fee in lieu, purchase prices, and rental prices. Any public comment this evening on this matter? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and turn it back to council for a motion.
Frank, excuse me, I just have a quick question. Is there anything requiring us to change this year? I'm just thinking that we're raising these thresholds in a time when money is tight. Is there anything that requires us to update these every year, or is it just we're supposed to?
I guess I don't really remember anything saying we require it to be updated annually, but it was expected and understood that prices of houses are changing, and so in order to keep pace with that, we would need to update those numbers. And area median income numbers do change every year as well. So we're trying to keep pace with the income and the market. So if we miss a year, then we're kind of, missing that market rate.
Well, I understand that, but essentially what we're doing is we're raising the floor for people that may or may not
We're also
be working right now.
raising the fee that people would pay into an affordable housing program.
Okay. All right.
Because that gap, of course, is changing as well.
Okay. Thank you.
And, well, Wendy, one other question, and maybe this is Angie. I assume we're required to look at this annually.
Right.
Are we also, is this just simply the time annually we're supposed to do this? Do we have?
I got the information from NMAR like in January, and
Right.
then the HUD numbers come out in April. I mean, I guess kind of in my mind, ideally, it'd be nice to do it in July or June, because that's when we adopted the program originally, so it's a little bit more on an annual basis. But our housing committee hadn't met, and so we only recently had a chance to kind of go over this stuff with them as well. So that's kind of the delay here.
Okay. All right. So,
I mean, generally, I think that's probably when it should occur.
it should be occurring annually in July when we.
Yeah, that's ideal. I think that'd be ideal.
Okay. Thank you. I'm open for a motion.
I would move to approve resolution number 20-35. What we need?
I'll second.
All right. Seconded by Councilor Hennon. Ben, do you need to speak to your motion or have any other comments?
No, I just think I know when we adopted the program, the intention was to peg it to the state and federal numbers that come out each year. So the numbers in the program stay fresh based on current conditions in the market. And I do think that was the intent when we passed it. I think it's important, otherwise it becomes very hard to update it later. And so I feel it would be appropriate to update these numbers at this time.
Great, thank you. Any other comments on the motion? Seeing none. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed, like sign. The motion passes unanimously. Okay, thank you. Pardon me? What? Thank you, Counselor. All right, we're still fine, okay. I'd like to move on to what will be ordinance, I think, 20-12, an ordinance amending Title 11, zoning regulations, Chapter 2, zoning districts, Article 2K, WB2, secondary business district of the Whitefish Code. David, thank you.
Good evening, Vice Mayor and Council. So a few months ago, we had a work session on the WB2 zoning district, and at that time, the City Council directed staff to bring forward some zoning text amendments to that zoning district to look at some of the permitted and conditional uses, specifically some of the uses that maybe are ones that we wanted to move from the permitted uses to conditional uses to allow some additional input, community input, and potential conditions to mitigate any impacts that those things might have. And so, as you guys probably know, the B2 district is our secondary business district as opposed to our downtown general business district. And it specifies an area for retail sales and services, as well as recreational activities that need large parking, display, or storage areas and depend on the proximity of the highway and arterial streets for those businesses. One of the businesses that we are looking at moving from the permitted to the conditional uses is automobile, boat, RV, machinery, and equipment sales, rentals, and repair. And all those types of uses have large parking and display areas in order to show their merchandise or store vehicles, and thus they have a greater potential for impacts, specifically aesthetic impacts. A lot of those types of uses have somewhat less traffic than things like grocery stores or other uses in that zone, but we do have some standards that would protect some of the aesthetics, like our landscaping requirements, architecture review, non-residential standards. However, as far as these types of uses go, I think that having them as a conditional use would allow more opportunity to look at screening of equipment, additional landscaping that might be required, and other things like that that could be mitigated on a case-by-case basis. So this would impact some of the smaller businesses like Howie's or Ridgie's. If they do any kinds of expansion, they'd be required to do a conditional use permit. For some of the bigger existing businesses like Don K are already over our 10,000 square foot threshold in that zone, so they need to get a conditional use permit anyway if they do expand. And then parts sales like Napa or CarQuest are not included in this, so they would remain in the permitted uses. One of the other issues that, or types of uses that the council wanted us to look at was formula businesses, specifically formula restaurants. Currently, that's the zone, the WB2, where we direct those types of uses. They're not permitted in the WB3 downtown, and they are a conditional use in our WB1, the other commercial district that we have. So the B2 is really the only zone where they don't currently have to go through a process, or they're currently banned. So with these changes, formula restaurants specifically would have to be differentiated from regular restaurants, and then a conditional use permit required for those things. There are several of them currently in that corridor, so those would be impacted if they do want to do any changes or expansions, including McDonald's, Subway, and Dairy Queen. There's another use that we're looking at moving back into the permitted uses, which is entertainment uses. That was been in the zone forever, and then when we did the amendments to the B2 last fall, they were tied in with hotels and motels, and for somehow, even though the staff report had them staying in there when we went through the ordinance process, there was a typo, and that ended up inadvertently getting moved out of there, so we're just recommending putting that back in there. And the entertainment uses are defined as uses catering to visitors and residents that provide recreational activities, including indoor theaters, bowling alleys, enclosed skating or golf facilities, and other similar indoor facilities. There's a few other uses that are kind of antiquated. Frozen food lockers, we're looking at just removing that. Bus depots is another one that's been in the code for a long time. We recommended just taking that out. When this went to the planning board, they did make a motion and agreed that that should probably just be moved into the conditional uses instead, just in case there was an opportunity for some kind of a public transit bus depot in that zone. We'll talk about a little bit more about the planning board later on, but crematories, there's another use that we wanted to probably recommend moving out of the permitted uses to the conditional uses, as they could have some potential impacts on adjacent businesses. There's another antiquated one, seed and grain sales, and we're just recommending changing that term to say farm, ranch, and garden supplies. Something that we would want in that zone rather than other zones, just because of the types of equipment and other things that would need to be displayed that does fit into the WB2 intent. One of the things when we're working on our Highway 93 South Corridor plan that came out of our economic thing was looking at where this community can grow and where there's opportunities for light manufacturing. And because we have such a limited amount of industrial property in the city, and some of that industrial property has already been changed as far as their uses go, specifically like the Idaho Timbers property. We've had a lot of different businesses want to locate in the WB2, but we're turned off by the process that there is in there. So we were looking at moving the light assembly and light manufacturing from the conditional uses to just being a administrative conditional use. So it'd still go through a process where we were able to add conditions on there. We would still notify the neighbors. And if it was something egregious, then it could be bumped up into a full conditional use permit process. And if the particular use was over 10,000 square feet in the footprint, it would still have to go through a conditional use permit process. Research laboratories and institutions is a use that's currently permitted in the WB4. We're recommending adding that to the conditional uses of the B2 to provide a potential future high-tech research campus opportunity or other types of things. Leaving it in the conditional uses allows for any impacts to be mitigated. Another use that we're looking at adding in here is personal services. That's a use that is currently allowed, permitted as a use by right in the WB1 as well as the WB3 district, or two other commercial districts. It's also an administrative conditional use in our high-density residential zones along major arterials. So those types of uses are specialized need, providing a convenience or cater to a particular lifestyle to an individual customer, manual skill and dexterity, and there are things like delivery and pickup, catering, event planning, guiding and outfitting, personal trainers, tattoo parlors, personal spa and grooming services, including manicure, facial, hairstylists, makeup consulting. Right now, hair salons is a permitted use in the WB2. We've had several places spring up that are nail salons and things like that. Sometimes they're associated with the hair salon and sometimes they're standalone. And a lot of those are very difficult to differentiate between what types of use is their primary use or which is an accessory use within that type of business. For years, personal services are already allowed in the B2 zoning district. So it's one of the things where, those types of uses are ones where people are driving to specifically to go to. When they're spread out through a community, it does reduce vehicle trips. There was some concern about strip malls and those types of businesses being located in strip malls. And again, we do try to encourage multi-tenant buildings. They're more ecologically sound, efficient. They reduce impervious surface by sharing parking lots. They also reduce vehicle trips because they can be closer to different neighborhoods. Also, in our downtown master plan, in our B3 district, which is our core retail district, in that downtown master plan, it says that, ground floors of all of the downtown block frontages should be limited to retail uses exclusively. Personal services is not a retail use, so those types of uses compete directly with retail uses. So by allowing up more opportunities in other zones for those types of uses, it's going to free up more space downtown for retail uses, which is what the downtown master plan calls for. When that went through the planning board, they did recommend that be moved from the permitted uses to the conditional uses. I think that's probably fine, although most of those types of uses aren't very egregious. Might be better off as an administrative conditional use, just to be a little bit faster in the process. And then there's one other small change where currently in the B2 it talks about 20-foot green belts in a side yard setback. And one of the things with our Highway 93 South plan is we're looking at creating more frontage roads and access off of more of a grid network. And our definition of a green belt is an 8-foot high side obscuring fence, which would not be very conducive to retail uses or frontage roads. And that's one of those things we've never really enforced that on the side frontages anyway. But we do require it when it abuts residential districts. So we're just looking at maybe removing that specifically out of there. So that kind of goes over the uses. I don't know if you wanted me to go in a little more detail. I know the time is getting late, but as far as the zoning requirements, we do look at, is this supported by the growth policy whenever we do a zoning text amendment. And they do, as far as moving things to conditional uses, fulfills growth policy goals 1 and 5 to protect and enhance small town feel and ambience of Whitefish, as well as protecting the special character and quality of existing neighborhoods, and is supported by the downtown business district master plan. The amendments promote public health and safety, because we can place conditions on high impact uses or unattractive development to mitigate some of those things. And then they have a positive impact on transportation and utilities. It gives us an opportunity, again, to look at those impacts before a project is improved on a case-by-case basis when those things do go through a conditional use permit process. So that's kind of a summary of that. Staff did recommend approval. This did go to the planning board on August 20th. At that meeting, no one spoke at the public hearing. We didn't receive any public comments up until that hearing. Today we did receive 10 email comments on that. They're kind of touched on both this text amendment and the other one before you guys tonight, with a few concerns about some of the changes, potential changes. As far as the planning board public hearing, they did unanimously recommend approval. And again, there was an amendment to move personal services from the proposed permitted uses to the conditional uses, and that did pass. So that is the summary of that particular text amendment. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Steve?
I have a couple questions. Thanks, Dave. First one, so the only administrative CUP in this area is for light industrial, is that right?
In these amendments?
Yeah.
Yeah, currently that's what we're proposing for a administrative CUP.
Okay. And why that one in particular?
Well, at the work session that we had with the council, we discussed the potential of moving it straight into the permitted uses for light manufacturing. I think it felt, there was some concern that there might be some that might be egregious. So there would be an opportunity to notify the neighbors, depending on the kind of uses. I mean, light manufacturing is different than heavy manufacturing in that, it's things that don't really impact the neighbors, and our definitions in the code are pretty specific about that. Okay. The one thing that they might have that could be an issue could be outside storage. But, we could develop specific standards for that, or it gives us an opportunity to give, make sure that things are screened that are stored outside of those kinds of uses. Okay. But, it's from an economic development standpoint, that's the kind of, businesses that we want in our community that create higher paying jobs. There's very limited places to put them. I get inquiries all the time about the B2, and I've had several that chose not to move in there because they did not want to go through that CUP process, so. Okay.
My other question is, so if somebody builds a building with several office spaces in it down there, if I wanted to put a nail salon in and change careers, thank you for laughing. Would I need a CUP to put a nail salon in there?
Well, right now, it's not a permitted use. Nail salons are not a permitted use in the B2. However, if you have a hair salon that also does nails, then you can do that in there. Or if you're in the mall, you can also do that. So in the B2, the mall has no restrictions on personal services. Okay. Because it's grandfathered in, basically.
Okay, I'm just.
So, but with this change, yeah, I mean, we recommended moving it into the permitted uses and then taking out hair salons out of because it would be included in personal services. And if you do choose to move it to the conditional uses, then you would need to put hair salons back in there, because I think that's a use that's already established in there. We already have several of them in that zone. But.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. I'm just trying to wrap my head around the fact that.
That was a planning board recommendation, was to move that into the conditional uses rather than in the permitted uses.
It just seems like we would want to encourage kind of condensing some businesses into multi-office space buildings, if that's what gets built. and that it might be onerous for somebody who would want to start some kind of small nail salon or hair salon to go through the CUP process on that. That's all, just thinking. Thank you, that's all I have.
Any other questions for Dave? Ben?
Thank you, Dave. Just to circle back on the administrative CUP for assembly and manufacturing for a second. Maybe Steve already asked this, but just to clarify in my head, is there anything different about that particular use that would prompt it to be an administrative CUP than some of these others?
You know, I mean, there's a lot of uses that could potentially impact neighboring property owners. I mean, if you're doing light manufacturing or assembly, you know, you may have some truck traffic that comes in and out, you know, deliveries. You might need some outside storage spaces, but, you know, other than that, generally, you know, those types of businesses don't really impact, you know, other businesses. It just really depends on the kind of business it is. I mean.
Sure. And under what circumstances would it actually escalate to a full CUP?
You know, I mean, typically if there's conditions or there's concerns raised that can't be mitigated by conditions of approval, that's one of the criteria in the code that specifically allows us to bring it up. I mean, I think there's some other administrative CUPs because of the amount of, you know, letters and opposition that we got, that we just politically raised it up, even though the code didn't specifically give that as a factor. But we would probably, you know, if it's something that all the other neighbors around it were, you know, extremely opposed to, then it, you know, makes sense to bring it to a public process to go through, so.
Okay.
But it's a quicker timeline. I mean, it's, with an administrative conditional use permit, we would notify the neighboring property owners, but then, you know, staff would make that decision instead of it taking 3 or 4 months to go through the process to the planning board and the city council. So it's still, but it does give us, you know, an opportunity to put additional conditions on there for things, so.
Okay.
Rather than a building permit.
Sure. My next question is, could you address the concern about how that zoning district being defined for large-scale businesses, and how personal services fits into that? Do you think that is in the view of what that zone was supposed to be? Or just, could you know, the concern that came in through email, could you address that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's quite a few different types of uses in that zone that aren't necessarily large-scale ones, are permitted uses like a laundry, dry cleaning, things like that are permitted uses in there that don't necessarily need that kind of thing. You know, professional offices is very, very similar. I mean, we treat them very similarly in the code. We allow professional offices in every zoning district, basically every commercial district, and a lot of the residential high-density ones. And sometimes those two things overlap, and we have a hard time determining if something's a personal service versus a professional office. You know, massage therapist is one that we struggled with for a long time, but because, you know, the massage therapists came to us and convinced us that they're licensed by the state, so they're really a professional office and not a personal service. So, you know, from a zoning standpoint, those two things are very similar, which is why we'd like them both to be in the same zone, because it's just much easier for us to administer, because those types of things come in all the time, and we have illegal ones springing up all the time. You know, and some of them we don't even realize, like, you know, 2 men in a truck came into town, and we didn't, you know, we're looking through the thing like, oh wow, that probably should have been a personal service, because it talks about that thing, you know, as kind of a business, but it obviously makes sense to be in the B2 because they have big moving trucks, and I can't even imagine them trying to operate in the downtown or in the high-density residential zone. So, you know, obviously makes sense for that type of a use to be in the zone where there's large parking and places for them to put, you know, those types of businesses. Does that answer your question? But yeah, I mean, again, you know, there are several uses in there that aren't necessarily limited to those types of display, but in general, you know, grocery stores, car dealerships, those kinds of things that need lots of display, we've directed out there. You know, the downtown specifically wants retail uses, and personal service is not a retail use, and it competes with that. So, you know, an argument that somehow we need those downtown, I don't think holds water, because the downtown master plan specifically calls for ground floors to be 100% retail. You know, there might be some room upstairs in businesses downtown, but on the flip side, most of those are being used for condos now, and there's very few spaces upstairs in our downtown core that, you know, there's a few massage therapists and things like that.
If it wasn't a conditional use or permitted use, what would happen? I mean, how many businesses do we have down there that are in this category?
Personal services?
Yeah.
We don't, you know, we don't really have any right now, other than, you know, that 2 men in a truck is the only one I can think of that maybe, that, you know, fits into that category, that are in the B2. You know, there was a hair salon that opened that we made them change it into, or a nail salon, we made them change it into a hair salon. So they changed their sign to say hair salon, even though their main business is probably still nails, but, because they were already open and operating, you know, before they even submitted a business license. But, you know, we definitely get, you know, we've had a lot of tattoo parlors we've had to send downtown that they thought they'd rather operate in that zone, but, you know, the downtown or the other areas where personal services are allowed is the only place they can open, right? So.
Okay. And my last question is, I saw in the planning board comments, somebody asked the question, why do we treat formula restaurants differently from formula retail? Could you address that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's different than formula retail.
Or formula anything, you know, Petco or whatever. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a, you know, an interesting conundrum. I think restaurants are specifically something that you know, they have a smaller footprint, whereas a bigger business like a store, formula retail store, is something that we may see anyway with the conditional use permit because of the square footage, be over that 10,000 square foot threshold. But you know, as far as differentiating them from, you know, regular restaurants, I mean, it's part of it's an aesthetic, it's a feel for the community, an opportunity to look at making sure that they don't look like, you know, every other McDonald's in the country or other you know, things like that. So, which we do have some standards in our architectural review standards that require them to have a different types of, you know, color schemes and building designs. But you know, Town Pump's a good example too. So.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Dave on this matter? Thank you, Dave. We advertise this for a public hearing, and I'd like to open that public hearing now. Do we have any public comment? Rhonda?
I hope you can hear me through my 3 layers. First of all, let me thank you all for your public service, for volunteering, and for being so gracious and respectful to the public. It's a lot that you do, and I know that all the citizens of Whitefish appreciate it. I did stick around, and I am the only one here, because this is actually a pretty important thing, the B2 and what uses are allowed in it, that has been discussed and argued about, and committees have been formed, and there was a mediation that included 20 citizens that went on for months over what uses should be in the B2. And I think the unique conditions this summer with COVID and people not wanting to come to meetings, and just the difficulty of information dissemination has made it so that you don't have a room full of people. But I think there are a lot of people very interested in what does happen in the B2 and what uses are allowed, because it is the entrance to our town and we are all impacted by it, as is evidenced by how much interest in the past has been generated over these very questions. Part of my comment is the cartoon that I took out of the pilot, because I think that reflects what a lot of people are concerned about. In fact, the B2 is a secondary business district. The intent is specifically for large businesses that require large storage or large display and a lot of parking and are vehicular oriented. And that's right in your code, right at the beginning, intent. At the time that we did the B2, B3 mediation, I participated in that, and so did the mayor. Unfortunately, he's not here tonight. And we went over a lot of uses with a fine-tooth comb. And I think quite a few of the suggestions tonight are good. Cleaning up archaic uses, moving Formula Restaurant to a CUP is, I think, essential for the health of our community going forward. But I do think there are a couple things suggested that are problematic. The B3, which is the downtown zone and includes the railway district, is the general business district, and it's meant to be the commercial center, not just retail, the commercial center. And personal services are allowed in the B3 everywhere except the ground floor face of 4 blocks of Central Avenue. They're allowed on all the side streets, they're allowed on all the other floors, they're allowed on Spokane and Central and Baker, they're allowed in the railway. Those services are also allowed in the B1, think Alpine Village. They're allowed in the R3 on 2nd Street West, they're allowed in the R3T. They're allowed in the R4, Spokane, South Central, Baker. They're allowed everywhere. And those kinds of uses generate a lot of byproduct. Shopping. You go downtown, you get your hair cut, you go to the Toggery, you buy a pair of shoes, you get a coffee, you maybe meet a friend for lunch. That's what people do when they do special services. Meet up with your friends, you have your nails done, and you go shopping. Those are things that create the vitality of a downtown core. And if you move the personal services out, that's very harmful to the synergy of your core. And at the same time, it's very harmful to the entrance to your town because it will create a strip mall proliferation because they are very small businesses, often sole proprietors, and undercapitalized a lot of times. And they need inexpensive rent, and so you get that strip mall thing, you know? You've been in millions and millions of towns where you have these strips with tattoo parlors and so on. And that is definitely not what the community wants to see. It's not what the B2 was meant for. I hope that is what the B2 becomes. There's a good corridor planning process going on. This is not a recommendation from that committee. And I really hope that you guys would sort of take a deep breath and take this piece out. And if we need to discuss it further in the future, fine, but this is a bad idea. The hair salon was a compromise made in the B2, B3 negotiation because there were 4 hair salons at that time out there. It was hard for the planning department to enforce because they had slipped in. And so we knew that that would be used as an argument going down the road for personal services, but we were urged to compromise and by Brian Muldoon, and we did allow or agree that hair salon could be permitted, mostly as a cleanup effort, but that should not now be used as a reason for permitting all these other uses, which are really inappropriate in that zone. Now, the other one I have a problem with is the administrative CUP for light manufacturing. An administrative CUP only requires that the neighbors be notified, so no one in the community will even know about this. And there could be something that is really not desirable in the entrance to our community that no one will know is happening, so they can't raise the alarm and, you know, it'll be approved. So light manufacturing should certainly be a CUP. And I think that kind of business is a significant undertaking, and it shouldn't be asking that much to have a CUP process to put manufacturing in the entry corridor of your community. And just as an aside, I'm confused about the 2 men in a truck because I think moving and storage was allowed in the B2, and they're movers. So I'm not so sure I'd call that a personal service, but that's, I didn't really look it up. But remember Stacy moving was there on Baker? So I think moving is probably allowed. Otherwise, it's all good, and I support it. And I hope that you will consider the damage that a bunch of strip malls will do. I'm sure there are landlords out there who would just love to be able to rent to personal services, but it's not the vision the community has for the corridor. Thank you.
Any further comment tonight? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and turn it back to council for comments or a motion of some kind.
I'd like to ask if we can delay a vote on this. I'm not sure exactly what the process for that is.
You could move, Steve, I think the option would be to move to table to a date certain. That would work to do that if that's what your intent is.
Yeah, I would move to, is it a postpone or is it a table? I always forget which one it is. I think it's postponed until the next meeting of the city council, which would be September 21st. Because I'm brain dead at this point. It's been a long night.
I hear you. The only thing I offer, and we've had the public hearing, and we've had Dave's staff report, if we delay it to that time, if we have further questions for David, he will not be here for our next meeting, and we'll be gone, so that we would lose that opportunity if you wanted to delay it. We're not under a particular timeline other than we'd like to get this done. Steve, we could delay it till the following meeting as well, if you want to postpone it to that, to have Dave available to us. If that would be helpful.
So we could delay it till the first meeting in October?
Yes.
I would opt for that one, actually, which would be October 5th, just because if there's no, I mean, this is not an urgent change that we need to make to our code, I don't think. So that's my, I guess that's a motion then, to postpone the vote on this until October 5th, with the public comment remaining closed, because we've had that.
Okay. Do I have a second? Motion fails for lack of a second. Do I have another motion?
Oh, yeah, if I can find my place in the world here, which I always have a hard time doing. And we're going to be, ordinance 20-12 now, are we? Yeah.
Yes.
I would move to approve ordinance 20-12, which is an ordinance amending Title 11 zoning regulations, Chapter 2 zoning districts, Article A2K, WB2 business, secondary business district of the City of Whitefish City Code.
I'll second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Would you like to speak to your motion, sir?
Yeah, I would like to speak to it. A couple of things, I guess. First of all, I was the person that made the motion at the planning board to move personal services to conditioned use. I really wanted to eliminate it 100%. And I do understand that there's a need to have places for those, but I have to agree with Rhonda, there's a lot of places in the city that they can go. And this was an ongoing, for probably 2-year discussion with the WB2, WB3 business district meetings. And for the most part, it was like, let's just not let them out there. As I recall, most of the comments out of that were we didn't really want them. My second comment is with regard to the light manufacturing. I think I had a little bit of heartburn with that, but if I look at what we did with the administrative CUP, process and the Legacy Homes program. And what we did over on 7th, I think the administrative CUP worked really, really well over there. We did have a lot of neighborhood opposition, and we went to a full CUP, and we ultimately came through with something different that would have possibly been approved with an administrative CUP. So I'm perfectly comfortable with that one, but I would really like to see us remove personal services. I'm a little more comfortable with them as part of the conditioned use because it makes it a little bit more difficult, but they are the catalyst for strip malls. It's just, that's what they are. I mean, we can drive through any town in America, like Rhonda said, and we're gonna see strip malls filled with nail salons and tattoo parlors, and if they're easy and if they're an allowed use particularly, then people are gonna have incentive. Even though we have other things that would discourage construction of strip malls, people are gonna be empowered to build them, I guarantee, and we're gonna see them. And so I guess I would make a second motion and to amend my original motion, which would be eliminating personal services from the conditioned use portion also. See if it goes anywhere.
Yeah, is that okay with the second?
That's fine with me.
All right, as amended, any further discussion on the motion? Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So we'll take the amendment first. The amendment is to eliminate personal services from the WB3 or WB2 zone. Is that clear? Any comments? Just David.
One, if you do that, then you should leave hair salons in the personal or under the permitted uses, because otherwise they would be, right now they're struck out because they were a personal service and be included with those things, so.
Yeah, we would have to eliminate then and then allow anything that's grandfathered, yes.
Okay, so hair salons
Anything
would
that's
no
there
longer
would
be a permitted use?
grandfathered, and then we would eliminate, yeah.
Okay.
All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed, like sign. That passes unanimously. And we move back to the original motion, which is to approve, subject to the amendment, ordinance ordinance 20-12. Any further, Ben?
May I offer a friendly amendment?
Certainly. See if you get a second.
Yes, if everybody is so interested. I would offer a friendly amendment to remove the administrative CUP as it is attached to the light assembly and light manufacturing. And if I have a second, I will happily speak to it.
For purposes of discussion, I will second your motion.
I do think the administrative CUP process has worked well as it relates to affordable housing, but its application here feels kind of arbitrary to me. I mean, I think there is not any particularly great reason in my mind to have an administrative CUP for this particular use and not others, and absent any great reason to do it, I think by default we should not do it, and thus it would be my preference not to have it as an administrative CUP.
Any further discussion on the amendment?
I want to speak to that. There are areas, I think, in our code where we can make it easier for businesses such as light industrial, light manufacturing to come into our community and provide jobs that are here in our town that are decent paying, long-term jobs, kind of like the lip balm place behind the wave. And I think the CUP process, as we've been told over and over again, is onerous. And there are times, I think, when we just need to have it, if they check the boxes, they can administratively be approved. That's my opinion on that.
Additional comments?
Just
Andy?
restate the motion, please.
Ben, you want to restate your motion?
My motion is simply to remove the administrative CUP as part of the light assembly and light manufacturing use. Thus, it will be a regular conditional use.
Any additional comments? All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? Like sign, and the motion goes down, a 4-1 vote with Councilor Davis in favor. All right, and now we're back to our original motion, which is as amended by the approval of Ordinance 20-12, amending Title 11 of the zoning regulations. Any additional comments on that motion?
I would just say that I am going to vote against, not because I'm against it, I just can't make it a well enough informed decision this evening to decide one way or the other, so I'm going to vote against.
Thank you, Councilor. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed, like sign. And the motion passes 4-1 with Councilor Cornell in opposition. And that brings us to our final matter on our agenda this evening. It's now 10:15. I think we should be able to get through this, hopefully, and the other matters on our agenda, and then move on. Unless I have a motion that we should adjourn and move on. All right, let's move on to what will be Ordinance 20-13, an ordinance amending Title 11 of the zoning regulations, Chapter 3, Special Provisions, Section 42, Multifamily Development Standards, and Section 43, Mixed Use and Non-Residential Building Development Standards.
Good evening again. So we adopted this about a tiny bit over a year ago. These multifamily standards and mixed-use non-residential standards as part of our Legacy Homes program, zoning text amendments to give us a sort of more robust standards with regard to multifamily, as well as we use that as an opportunity to also create some additional site development standards for non-residential uses in the city. So after using them for a year, there's a few things that have come up through the course of that we felt like we needed to make some housekeeping changes to clarify some things where questions came up from developers that are having to abide by these standards. And then as originally when these were adopted, the council asked us to go back and update some of the illustrations that were in there to make them a little clearer and more professional, so we have done that. So in general, these changes clarify the intent, such as in the case of required open space, or else they provide a little more flexibility for certain exceptions, like landscaping, tree retention, public plazas, for the areas where we've put maximum setbacks in for non-residential buildings. So as you guys probably recall with the town pump, we had that maximum 25-foot setback requirement, but we wanted to save some trees in there. And there's some other potential things that could be put in that allow people to have further away from the street if they have a green belt, or if they want to put some kind of public courtyard or public seating or other pedestrian amenities. The main purpose of that is so that there would not be parking between that and the street. However, if there's opportunities for more buffer and green belt, I think that's a thing that we want to include. So again, these standards apply everywhere to every zoning district where those types of uses are allowed with regard to the multifamily and the mixed use. Let me start off with the multifamily standards. So one of the changes that we're looking at adding in there, and I'm sorry I don't have the reference for what page the staff report's on, but there is some language in our code currently with regard to multifamily buildings, or actually we have under 1123B12 it talks about multiple principal uses on a single lot of record. And when I started here back in 2007, I was told the interpretation of that included anywhere where there was multiple buildings on one lot, regardless of the uses. And so that's how the city had interpreted that forever. If there was multiple buildings on a lot, we just required them to get a conditional use permit. But what the code actually says is multiple principal uses on a single lot of record. And so there's always been a little consternation about if someone's doing, several apartment buildings, but it's all part of the same complex, does that then trigger that conditional use permit? Because it's the same principal use. It's a residential use and it's not multiple principal uses. I think this was really intended for, a single lot that has two separate standalone commercial buildings on there that might have two different impacts and to require them to go through a conditional use permit. The one thing that it's done is it's, forced developers that don't want to go through that CUP process to make larger buildings rather than splitting them up into smaller scale buildings that fit in better with the neighborhoods. We do already have standards when it comes to the WR3 and WR4 zoning districts and our other districts that require conditional uses for a certain number of units. And so the number of units would trigger the conditional use permit, not necessarily the size of the building or whether there's more than one building on there. So that's one of the changes that we're looking at adding just to the multifamily building standards. The rest of the stuff in there is pretty much clarifying things. We have a change talking about illustrations, that we took out some of the text in the illustrations and added it into the text of the zoning code, where it talks about, buildings must be grouped or sited with other buildings to create distinct outdoor spaces. And then we clarified that by saying being organized around common open space, courtyards, public open space, natural site features such as a stream corridor, or amenities such as recreational facilities. We eliminated language in here that talked about retention ponds being irregularly shaped. That is something that we regulate through our public works standards, and it really doesn't really have any place in the zoning code because we already have standards for that they have to abide by with our public works standards. So instead of that, we added some language that was suggested by the Architectural Review Committee, saying buildings must not present blank walls lacking articulation, modulation, or window and door openings to streets, access drives, or parking areas. And then again, I talked a little bit about the multiple apartment building language, again, not being subject to that. And again, the code really doesn't say that. And somebody could have challenged that over the years because it's not what the code said when it comes to multiple principal uses. Down, we got in the parking lot lighting section, the planning board made a recommended amendment in there, and that was the last line of that CI talks about lighting must be provided where stairs, curbs, ramps, abrupt changes in walk direction and crossing vehicle lanes occur. And we had originally recommended that it should be provided in the sense that, with our dark sky standards, it tells us to eliminate unnecessary lighting. And obviously safety is something that's important, but requiring them to have lighting in all those different situations could present a problem with regard to overlighting a site. So one of the recommendations from the planning board would say sufficient ground level lighting must be provided. So that way at least they can make a case where it's sufficient for those things. So maybe the other lights on the site shine on the stairs and curbs and ramps, and they don't necessarily have to put specific lighting on those things when they're already adequately lit through additional other lighting on the site. We added some under the grading and tree retention under F, some language that talks about multifamily projects must be designed to minimize impacts to existing topography and vegetation. And then we added language that says, and require a tree preservation plan with an application submittal. So we're requiring people to give us a tree preservation plan when any grading or trees are on the site. So that's something that's in the code up front. And then with regard to open spaces and common spaces, is one of the main reasons for this amendment. Just to clarify that, that was something that's come up with several projects that have come through the door, or at least we're considering coming through the door. And it talks about usable common open space of at least 10% of the site must be provided in a multifamily development for all the residents of the development. And then we added in a central location accessible to all units. Given the environmental and recreational benefit of open space, it should be integrated into the overall design of the development rather than consisting of residual areas left over after buildings and parking lots are sited. So it gives them a little more specifics on what we're looking for with regard to the usable common open space. It's an amenity for the people living there to be able to get outside, or places for kids to play and all that sort of stuff. And we don't necessarily want it to just be the building setbacks or the required landscaping areas to be considered as part of that 10%. And then under D, we clarified incorporating a variety of amenities and activities for all age groups in the open space, including but not limited to site furnishings such as benches, tables, picnic and barbecue areas, patios, courtyards, gardens, water features, tot lots, play fields, sports courts, such as tennis, volleyball, or bocce ball, and open lawns. And then a further clarification that required setbacks and landscaping buffers, parking areas, and emergency access and/or turnarounds cannot be counted as common area open space. So again, just making sure that those developments provide amenities for the people living there, and to make it a more habitable place. I didn't talk about this, but yeah, you will notice that most of the illustrations have been replaced with new illustrations in there. Updated ones. So that's it on the multifamily standards. If there's any questions on that one, I can talk about that, or we can move on to the non-residential and mixed use.
Probably as long as it's as fresh as it's going to be in everybody's mind. Does anybody have any questions on the multi-use? David? Okay.
All right, so section 11.343 is our mixed use and non-residential building development standards. And this is where we looked at the building setback and the building orientation section. That's kind of the main change in here, other than the illustrations. So under the orientation section, it talks about buildings must be oriented to the primary street frontage. And it says where properties front one or more streets, new buildings must be located no more than 25 feet from the primary street frontage. And we had one exception where it talks about the maximum front yard setback does not apply where a landscape green belt is required, and we added is proposed or required, because if there's an existing green belt there, or someone wants to put a green belt in and to add additional buffering off the highway, then that would be an exception. And then we added additional exceptions. Buildings must be located further away from the primary street when separated from the street by courtyards, outdoor seating areas, or areas of extensive landscaping. In those cases, buildings must be placed as close to those areas as practical. And again, this isn't just the B2 district we're talking about, it's anywhere these non-residential buildings apply. They are permitted. And then another exception would be buildings may be located further away from the primary street where separated from the street by existing healthy and mature trees being retained in perpetuity. In those cases, buildings should be placed as close to the trees as practical, and a plan must be submitted to maintain the health of the trees along with a replacement plan for dead, dying, or hazardous trees. And there's already exception for accessory buildings, and then we talked about no new vehicle access drive-throughs or private roads are allowed in the area between the buildings and the street. Must be either healthy, mature trees or landscape pedestrian space, such as a plaza, patio, or outdoor seating. So then there's a couple of illustrations that we eliminated out of there because they actually show up later in the document, the same basic illustration. And then separation, where buildings are separated from the primary street frontage by a required setback or a public sidewalk. We just clarified that because there are some other required setbacks in different zones. The space should contain public or pedestrian amenities. And then apart from that, under the mixed use adjacent to residential zones, we talk about some stepping down the massing of the buildings. Just clarifying that to help large buildings fit into the context of a neighborhood. That stuff that was in the illustration previously, and we just added that to the text of the code. So that's pretty much the gist of the changes being proposed in these standards. Again, they do comply with our growth policy standards to preserve and enhance the character qualities of the small town feel of the neighborhood. Promotes infill projects, massing and scale consistent with existing structures. And all those things are things that do promote the growth policy and are supported under our code and our growth policy. This did go to the planning board on August 20th. Planning board reviewed that. At the time of the meeting, we had not received any public comments. After the meeting, we discovered that Citizens for a Better Flathead had submitted some comments toward the meeting, and so those are included in here. Since then, as I mentioned, we did receive some additional comments today from citizens and from kind of some formula type comments, most of which were sort of cut and pasted ones. There was 10 comments that came in additionally today with some specific changes requested to the texts. At the planning board level, they did unanimously recommend approval of it with that one change, which I mentioned, talking about sufficient ground level lighting being provided where there's stairs, curbs, ramps, and abrupt changes. So that is the gist of that. Glad to answer any questions for you guys.
Any questions for David at this time? Yes, Ben.
Dave, could you help me clarify in my head the part about the multiple buildings? As it relates to multifamily, it has to, whether or not it goes through a CUP has everything to do with the number of units, right?
It does have to do with the number of units. So in like the WR4 zoning district, we reduced that threshold from what was unlimited number of units that could be built there as long as you could meet the parking requirements in general zoning to 7 units is a use by right, and above that is an administrative CUP, and then above that is a full CUP. I think it's 20 or something like that.
And wasn't there a provision in the zoning code that specifically said something like multiple buildings had to go to a CUP, or did we remove
No,
that?
what it says is multiple principal uses on a lot requires a conditional use permit. And so that's the standard, but we have interpreted that over the years. I mean, that was the interpretation before I got here, was that if there was multiple buildings, then that should get a CUP. And so we continued that interpretation of it, even though that's not what it says. It says multiple principal uses. And so something like an apartment complex is just one use. It's he would have done that as multiple buildings, but he, to make it fit in with the scale, but, he didn't want to have to go through that process. And so he just built one ginormous building, which turned out pretty nice, I think, but.
Yeah, no, and I definitely agree with that intent. And so like if you have, like R4 has a 7-unit threshold or something, right?
Right.
If you build 2 6-unit buildings, that's 12, you still have to go to a CUP, right?
If you built 2 6-unit buildings?
Right.
On one lot?
Yes.
You would not have, well, let me think. So it'd be, yeah, if you went over, if the total number of buildings was over 7, then, or total number of units was over 7, then you'd still have to go through the CUP.
Whether it's in 1 building, 2
Yeah.
buildings, 3 buildings?
Yep, to be on the same lot, yeah.
Okay. And does that same logic work for mixed use or commercial development, where if you have a 10,000 square foot threshold, if you have 2 9,000 square foot buildings, do you still have to go?
No, it's per building, so it's kind of meant to reduce the scale. So yeah, you could have multiple buildings under 10,000 square feet. But if it's a commercial use and you have multiple buildings on there, then that's going to require a CUP for multiple buildings. Because one of the things we added, that was in this section on the non-residential standards specifically says that they have to go through the conditional use permit process
If you
for
do
multiple buildings. Yeah.
Blanketly.
What's that?
Blanketly, if you do multiple buildings, you have to
On a single lot in a commercial zone, yeah.
Okay.
So then it's not really based on the principal uses anymore. It's based on the buildings, which is really what it should be. So
right.
Kind of clarifies that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Dave? Thank you. We advertised for a public hearing on what is potentially going to be ordinance 20-13, ordinance amending Title 11 zoning regulations, Chapter 3, special provisions, Section 42, multifamily development standards, and Section 43, mixed use non-residential building development standards. And we'll open the public hearing now. Thanks, Rhonda.
Thank you. Rhonda Fitzgerald, 412 Lupfer. I forgot to do that before, sorry. Thanks for the clarification on the multiple buildings. I was totally confused about that, because it seemed like by having several smaller buildings, you were kind of getting out of the review process, but apparently not, so that's good. I have to say this is pretty complicated, and I haven't quite grasped how this really affects neighborhoods and so on. It's pretty complicated, but The drawings are a huge improvement. Thank you very much. You can actually see what the direction is in the new drawings. So that's a good thing. I am quite confused about the 25-foot maximum setback of 25 feet for commercial buildings. I thought we wanted bigger green belts and more mature trees and more green space and not that feeling of strippiness. So I'm kind of confused why it's a maximum, no. Yeah, it's a maximum setback of 25 feet. You're asking the buildings to be very close to the highway. And I didn't think that was what we were trying to accomplish. So I'm confused about that. And maybe David can clarify that, but I would think you would want to incentivize more landscaping, more green belts, maybe berms even, definitely protected bikeways, sidewalks and everything. And for sure, we don't want parking lots in front of the buildings, but we would like landscaping in front of the buildings is my thought, with the parking behind, which is in the document. So I'm very confused about that one. Thank you.
Further public comment? Not seeing any. I'll close the public hearing this time and turn it back to council. I, for one, am becoming fuzzy. I will carry on with each of you as long as we want to do that. If there's a motion to move forward on this, that's fine. If there's a motion to deny, that's fine. If there's a motion to table, let's do that.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I would move to table this agenda item until the first meeting in October.
Is there a second to that? Motion is moved and seconded. I don't believe we require any discussion on this matter. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed, like sign. It passes unanimously. This matter will be tabled or postponed until the first meeting in October. Thank you. With that said, next we have communications from our city manager. Dana, anything further you want to report or highlight from your report?
I do. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. First, I would like to put out a great thanks to the Kramer Family Fund at the Whitefish Community Foundation. They generously provided us a grant for 4 picnic tables at Riverside Park and a backless bench at Riverside Tennis Courts. In a time where we're in a pandemic, being able to eat outside and visit our parks and take that time is really helpful. And so our Parks Department is working on ordering those new picnic tables, and many thanks goes out to them. In my manager's report, you will see that I requested that we discuss moving to remote meetings or at least having some direction from the City Council. I have concerns as we move into the flu season come October that it's going to be very hard to consider whether or not people are sick with COVID or if they're sick with a cold or the flu. The city policies right now for employees is that if they have a family member that is sick with respiratory symptoms similar to COVID, that they actually have to remain home until their family member either tests negative for COVID or they're without symptoms for 48 hours. As you can imagine, with school being back in session, I think we will see some more employees having to stay at home. But again, we provide the benefit of sick leave so that people can do this and be paid. We don't want COVID spread around City Hall or our other facilities. We learned a lot with the last, our very first and only at this point, COVID case of an employee. And one of the things that we learned, is that masks, while very important, they do reduce the spread, will not be considered when quarantining individuals. So if 2 individuals are within 6 feet, both wearing masks, one person does test positive, and they were within 6 feet for 15 minutes or more, they will be put under quarantine by the health department. And so what that means, one, is that we're gonna have to move out of the council work session room because in my mind, I have you guys way too close over there. So we will hold work sessions in here moving forward unless we go to a remote setting. So there's different areas, that I think that could trigger it. One is IT does have to be prepared, and so we are looking at procuring WebEx again. We've all been using that. Changing the format now, I think, would just be confusing to the public. But so that, if it's a case, number of cases that, maybe we have active in the community, or I should say the county, because we don't get city numbers. Or if it has to do with an employee at City Hall testing positive for COVID, or a city council member, or a person that attended a council meeting. I just would like to have some direction of when and if you'd like to go. The big cities in Montana, all of them, with the exception of Great Falls, the big 7, they all are still remote, and mostly due to them having 11 or 12 plus council members, so they cannot socially distance in their chambers. And as you know, Kalispell recently went to remote meetings due to unmasked individuals. I do feel that we could provide better accommodations for our at-risk population as we move forward, knowing that either they have a health condition to where they can't wear a mask, or they are high risk due to age or underlying health conditions, that by providing an online format, they could participate online. I know that it's can be onerous to learn the technology side of things, but we would have a call-in number that they could call from their home line to participate if they so choose. So direction from council or discussion, I did talk to Mayor Mulfeld, and he was supportive of looking at going remote. And I know Rebecca had expressed to me at one point that she was also interested. So just wanted to get a feel for what the council's thoughts are on this matter.
Steve?
I think it's worth exploring. It's about all I got right now.
Ben, any thoughts?
I know that some of these complex topics, like what we're dealing with tonight, I know personally I really appreciate the value of in-person discussion because they are complicated. But it seems like the way the world is, there's possibilities where it's just cases explode or whatever, it's not safe and we can't be here. So maybe plan for the worst and hope for the best.
Ryan, thoughts?
Yeah, I think we should look into going remote again. We were remote before with hardly any cases every day. It seems kind of silly to not be remote now. I've been saying the same thing with the courts for the last 3 months, where no one was allowed into courtrooms when we had 12 cases a day. Now we're knocking on the door at 200 and it's a free-for-all. So yeah, I would be in favor of looking into that, Dana.
Andy?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think as the regular cold and flu season approaches, that we're probably going to get forced to that, and that's my guess. I think it's going to be tough to differentiate between the cold and the COVID for a lot of people, and then we're going to lose people, and yeah, and I have to admit, I mean, even in here with distancing, when we've got a bunch of people in here not wearing masks, I'm not super comfortable with that, I have to say, so.
Okay.
But yeah, I think, I am like Ben, though, I prefer being here. I think it does make the meetings better for all of us, but for some people, it may provide a better access too if we go back to remote. I don't know, because I think there's people that aren't showing up because they don't want to come here, and so I'm kind of like Steve. That's all I can say. So.
Dana, my feeling is that I'm kind of in Ryan's camp. I think that we're now in a position where we need to seriously consider whether we just go back to remote meetings because of the season and what is currently happening in the valley. I also believe that we are not getting a number of people showing up to comment for that very reason. They're uncomfortable being around people, whether they've got a medical permit or not, that don't have masks on. So I think we should, I'm in favor of considering going back to figuring out how we can go back. I think the only way we could make it better in terms of public participation is if, and I don't know there's a practical way to do it, but it would be nice for us to be able to see, to the extent people wanted to be seen and not just heard as a voice for their public comments, if they could be, if the WebEx would allow us to bring them on as their comments want to come on, if they wanted to to appear, I think that would be very helpful to us. But I think we did a pretty good job with it last time. The only other thing I would say is that if we're going to do this, one of the issues that did get raised was that apparently for a period of time to call in, it was a long distance number. I think we need to make sure whatever their access is, it's got to be on a local basis. And so that would be my only entreaty and only thought on the matter. But I would like us to begin to consider, and you to consider, recommending whether or not and when we would go to a remote meeting. And I too prefer being here like Andy. I prefer being able to see people even when they're not so pleasant. I think that's just better for us, and it's a better process. But these are different times, and so I for one would be in favor of going back to going to a remote situation again for the foreseeable future, through the end of the year potentially, or until we have a vaccine.
Okay. I do appreciate all of your comments, and we would provide, we've already looked into it with WebEx to make sure that we are providing a toll-free number. So that cost is factored in there. The cost to the city through December 31st will be covered by CARES Act funding, so there is no actual cost to the taxpayers. We can actually, well, maybe in the end from the federal government, but the federal government will be supporting us in that cost to have to go remote. So we will bring forward an ordinance for that discussion topic. And maybe it's a resolution. I'd have to check with Angie how we did that last time. But for holding the meeting remotely moving forward. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else you want to bring to our attention this evening, Dana?
Not this evening, thanks.
Thank you. We have one letter in the packet, letter from the Solberg Family Glenwood Trust. Second request for financial assistance to place safety buoys around the perimeter of the sandbar. Any comments from council or thoughts on the matter? Ben?
I feel the benefit to the public would outweigh the cost. It doesn't only takes 1 or 2 boating accidents to cost a heck of a lot more than those buoys do. Not to mention it's dangerous, so I don't know I know it's a little weird because it's maybe not in the city. I'm not even really sure how that works, but I think it would be very nice for the community at large to have buoys placed on that sandbar. I have hit it personally on my boat. It's not great.
Thank you. Any other thoughts from anybody else? Andy?
Yeah, just because I have, like I said last time, I've watched a few boats go through there, and before we have anybody try and do a Denny Reberg again, I think we do need to market, and it's sad that FWP doesn't have anything in there, and I guess technically we did annex the surface of the lake, so in some way it kind of is irresponsible. And my guess is at some point, if we don't mark that as a navigational hazard, we're going to have our emergency services personnel out there picking people out of the rocks, and that's not going to be pleasant either. So, I mean, if Dana maybe come back to us next meeting, if you can see where there might be some funds, and we can look at it at that point. But rather than just saying, but I'd like to see, it seems like we've exhausted the resources, and, unless, the only thing I don't know that they've done is reached out to any people that are typically benefactors of all things lake, and that's a possibility also. We could maybe suggest that to them, but I'm not sure that that's viable either, but something needs to be done for sure.
Okay. Do we have any idea what the cost is going to be associated with this?
$2,750, I think, is the total cost. $2,750 bucks.
Okay.
And I can tell you just from a budgetary standpoint, obviously, as you recall our budget, we did increase our cash reserves in the general fund. We do have $25,000 that we set aside as contingency because of COVID. We weren't sure what was going on there. So we do have contingency. Worst case scenario, there's a budget amendment at year end, but we do have the cash reserve should we need to fund this with general fund dollars. That would be the only funding source that would be available for this type of purchase. I do agree that I think the buoys need to be there. We've had them there in the past. And so once you've already marked that spot, had it been never marked before, I think it would be a different situation, but I do feel that general taxpayer dollars could be used on something like this.
You said we had buoys there before. What happened to them? They just got old? Oh, okay. All right.
I saw one of them beached by our neighbor's house the other day, so it was a little beat up.
Okay, thank you. I think we've got some consensus here that we'd like to pursue that. Dana, if you would like, and bring something back to us, maybe next meeting.
Really, I think if we could just get direction from the council this evening, a concurrence from all of you, then we could work with them and go through our budget process with just having them submit an invoice with us directly.
So moved.
All right. Is that the direction of council?
Yeah.
I think we've got nods all around. Let's do it.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we're down to communications from city councilors and the mayor, who's not here. Steve, we'll start with you.
I have some things I'd like to say, but maybe I'll save them for an email.
Okay. Ben, you have anything this evening?
I hate to say anything at this late hour, but the gentleman who made an effort to come in about pedestrian safety on Wisconsin, I walk up and down there all the time. I agree with him. I don't know if there's anything we could do about that, but it'd be nice.
Thanks. Ryan?
I don't have any comments this evening.
Andrew?
No comment.
With that, I have a couple of things. And to your point, Ben, I actually saw the gentleman during the break, and I asked him to send his comments to us in writing, so we had the articulation of them. We have the minutes here, so that I think we can begin to probably be able to look at some of the things that might be done and or why they aren't done, figure it out. So I think that's probably fair. The other I'd like to say, just to an empty room that was full quite earlier, two things. For the most part, I appreciate the fact that most everybody was willing to put on a mask and come in here and comment. I appreciate that very much. It was a concern of mine that if people weren't that cooperative, and they weren't doing it the Whitefish way, that we were going to have to suspend this meeting out of the safety of those concerned. So I appreciate that very much. I agree wholeheartedly that the right to protest and the right to speak and to petition one's government should be very little regulated. On the other hand, I think that it would behoove all involved to take into account the community's commitment to civil discourse. And that includes the language that is used. It includes addressing council and other members of the public. And I would like to see us act like Whitefish. And I think, again, we have a very polarized situation with these protests. But understand that the only reason that ordinance was even proposed was because of people acting badly. So if we want to continue to protect our right to free speech and to be able to petition our government and petition your government, we need to start acting like that's important. And we're going to do it in a proper way, and we're going to do it in a persistent way. That's fair. But we all have to treat other citizens with equal respect and act like it. That's the Whitefish way. And so I think we need to keep that in mind as we talk about Whitefish and talk about who's doing what in Whitefish, that we all need to be respectful of one another. And that's the only reason we were in a position where we had to even consider something like this. And so I appreciate the work of our police department, Chief Dial, Bridger, in trying to manage this problem or help us get some tools to manage the problem. And I think we need to understand that that's the spirit within which we were trying to operate this evening. And so I hope everybody understands that. Nobody in this building has any interest in limiting in any substantive way your right to protest or petition your government, or to hold a rally, or to gather. But we need to do it right. So with that, I think we're adjourned.